Greetings, new hammer, middle hammer, and old hammer folks alike. I am OldGrumpyWolf, aka Lennon Midnight, and welcome to the Minibar Podcast. I'll be serving you up lots of awesome painting nerdiness, talking to other painters from around the web. And tonight at the bar, we have Luke Learns How to Paint. Or, I'm sorry, Luke Learns to Paint. There we go. Welcome to the show, Luke. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really good to be here. Thanks.
So, and we're just kind of how I start the show. Where are you at in the world?
I'm in Oxford, in England.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been living here for a bit over 10 years now, so it's definitely home.
Where'd you originate from?
Down in the southwest of England, a place called Devon.
Oh, I know where Devon is.
Yep.
My mom actually she was born there.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful part of the country. It's a place I like to go back to whenever I can. we go camping, our family. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's a really nice place. Lots of beautiful kind of national park out there. Dartmoor.
Yeah, she was born and raised there, and then she moved up to London in her 20s.
Nice.
And moved over here. She met my dad, had me.
So cool.
She's actually, I forget, she's actually back in England right now. I forgot where she is. She's staying over there for, she's over there helping her sister. Her sister's got some health issues, so she's been there for the last year. Mm-hmm. But to get the show started, the first question that I ask everybody is, what got you into the hobby in miniature painting?
So I'm a long time Warhammerer, I guess, with that kind of classic pause in the middle in the kind of 20s. But yeah, back when I was just starting secondary school in the UK, so high school-ish.
Okay.
When I was probably 12 or 13. Mm-hmm. I had a friend who picked up the Warhammer 2nd edition box set. That was around back then. So this must have been 95, 96, something like that.
That's right when I was in high school.
Yeah, yep. And so that was it, really. He kind of introduced me to that, and we kind of mucked around on the bedroom floor playing Blood Angels versus Orcs.
Nice.
Back when that was the kind of classic choice.
The cardboard orc dreadnought.
yeah, definitely. The wild one-sidedness of those fights, just ridiculous. But I loved it. I picked up the same box set, and my friend he kind of towards playing the Blood Angels, or eventually Dark Angels. I think he kind of developed into that. And I picked up the Orcs and built a massive, I don't know what, 2,000-3,000 point army of mostly lead Orcs or white metal. That was the kind of the beginning of it, and it snowballed a bit from there.
When did you discover the Black Templars?
Black Templars, I mean, they came around in third edition. I was still playing then, so we got third edition, and I didn't really connect with them all that much. I think Space Marines weren't particularly my thing back then, so I began with the Orcs, and that developed into Chaos as well through third edition. Well, they could ally back then, right? So second edition had pretty loose ally rules.
Wait, so Chaos and Orcs could ally?
Yeah. Oh, so if you were like baddies, then you could ally. If you were goodies, you could ally. So I had Orcs, and I added a few Chaos Space Marines as allies for them, and then I think the Chaos Space Marines took over eventually. I think that
was a carryover from Rogue Trader, because they're like the Orcs, the Storm Boys worshipped Khorne, I think.
I don't remember that. That's cool.
And then you also had, in Rogue Trader, you also had Orc hybrids for Gene Stealers.
Yep.
Now it's like the Tyranids won't even touch the Orcs. They're like, no, go away. We don't want your biomass.
Yeah, I think I remember something about Chaos Orcs, so that kind of worked. But yeah, I gave up on the allying pretty quickly, because the Chaos Space Marines played better than the Orcs did. They won more. So So I had a fair few of those. But yeah, Templars didn't come until I picked up the hobby again back in 2016, I reckon it was. And even then, not immediately. So yeah, I think when I was a kid, I had the Orc Army, the Chaos Army, and it was a kind of Chaos undivided. You know, I had Abaddon and his Terminator bodyguard, and then I had pretty much every kind of faction of Chaos to go with them, including some Black Legion and Red Corsairs, and all the various different Chaos God specific.
So you remember back in the good old days with the actual metal Abaddon.
Yeah, I mean he was heavy and his arms kept falling off, but he was pretty impressive. Especially Terminators were just incredible back in second edition, and him with five other heavy lead Chaos Terminators. They kind of wrecked and dropped in the end, ignoring every save.
That old Chaos Terminator with the autocannon. That autocannon was so stupid looking. God, it was terrible.
It was my favorite one.
Oh, really? I just hated it. I took mine, I cut the barrel, and I actually shortened the barrel on the damn thing because I hated how long it was.
Yeah, that was ridiculous.
Yeah, I couldn't put them in my model box.
Definitely part of the delight as a kid with those models were how kind of over the top they were.
Oh yeah,
really, really stylized, and loved that. So
when those Terminators came out, I thought they looked absolutely badass. Those things were great looking. I've got a couple still in black primer on my model box and never painted. I've been debating on painting one up as a Night Lord.
Oh, you definitely should. Yeah, go for it. Yeah, they were great. And definitely a good balance for my Orc knobs in Mega Armor. Yeah, the Mega Armor knobs and the metal ones of those, they look ridiculous as well. That's great.
Basically the Orc Terminators.
I've still got a soft spot for that, which is definitely kind of one of my side hobbies now. I think is enjoying looking at all the Old Hammer stuff that people do. I have not delved into that particularly myself, but we'll probably talk about that later.
Oh, I bet you're kind of excited for Olden Demon.
Yeah, I love seeing that stuff.
Are you participating in that, or are you just watching it?
I am just a spectator.
Oh, okay.
At the moment. Maybe one day.
With your level of painting, man, you should totally compete. You're good.
Yeah, I'd enjoy it, definitely. I think where I'm at is mostly having to kind of pick my projects quite carefully, because they take me a long time, and I don't get through all that many of them every year. So I need to kind of make those choices about where I'm gonna invest that time that I've got. But I've got, I don't know, you can just about see it. Which hand is it up here? So these boxes, they're Gorka Morka miniatures. So that turned up in my life just after third edition. Yeah, I think Gorka Morka came out after that.
Gorka Morka came out midway through second edition.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Because that was the Gorka Morka is really what changed the style of the orcs, like the way they were sculpted and the way they looked, and they went more toward like what we have now. Yeah.
I think they were spectacular. Me and that same friend, we picked up Gorka Morka and had amazing fun racing ridiculous converted trucks and bikes around the floor.
I always thought the Gobo models were like the best part of it, because they just became so animated and cartoony looking. Yeah, they were awesome. So I really enjoyed that back then, and I definitely have that kind of nostalgia for those orcs. So I've been scouring the various secondhand sites and eBay and stuff, and I picked up pretty much all of my favorite miniatures from that range. All of the kind of modern style orcs. Yeah. And I've yet to paint any of those, but that will happen at some point, and that will be a good Olden Demon entry. So with you getting into the hobby, did you get into it because of the gaming or the painting?
A real mixture, I think, back then. Yeah, I I would have started off for the kind of the love of the miniatures and the gaming. Obviously, when I began, I wasn't a painter. You know, I was 12 or 13, hadn't really done any of that before. Besides maybe some of those old Airfix kits. Is Airfix a thing in the States? It was a big brand of kind of military modeling.
Oh, I don't know. I never paid attention to the military stuff, or like the more, the realistic stuff.
Yeah. So that had been around a long time before I had any awareness of GW stuff.
Yeah.
So I had some old planes and things that my dad and I would have built and painted and stuff with the old Humbrol enamel paints.
That's the second time I've heard that name come up.
Yeah, I mean, really a proper pain to use, like a bit of a nightmare.
Tim Proud mentioned that in the last episode. He was like, "Yeah, those old Humbrol paints, man, they were terrible. They stunk."
Yeah,
I think we had. I think our primary one was testers here.
Yeah. They came in these little tins that you had to like open with a screwdriver, and yeah, a mess. But so yeah, I hadn't really done much painting at all, but I enjoyed it when I started. You know, I had a little desk in my bedroom, and I had paints and bits of model everywhere. I loved with the Orcs and the Chaos. Just hacking those to pieces and gluing weird stuff together. It was fantastic, and like a real inspiration for that was the old codexes. So the Orcs, I didn't know so much with the Orcs one, but the Chaos one had that double page spread from John Blanche where he'd illustrated
all the Chaos conversions,
like kit bashes.
Yeah,
so he kind of put together these drawn kit bashes with like arrows and little pointers saying this bit comes from this kit, this bit comes from the other thing, this is like a cocktail stick, this is like modeling clay. I
don't know why the conversion that he drew of the body was Mephiston, but he gave him like two different weapons, and then Mephiston gave him like wearing some kind of leopard striped fur.
Yeah, that's the exact thing.
Yeah, so I got that book floating around somewhere.
That was a huge inspiration, and I like recreated some of those conversions in my own Chaos collection, which I don't have anymore.
Oh,
an old school friend has it now.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, so that kind of took up a big chunk of my time. I think as time went on, even back then as a kid, I probably spent a bit more time doing conversions.
What really got you into the painting side?
I got back into it. So yeah, I think I probably played and collected and painted until my kind of late teens, maybe like 16, 17. And then one of my friends inherited my collection, and shortly after went off to university. Kind of all through that period, I'd occasionally like pop into Games Workshop to take a look at miniatures, and I'd flick through a White Dwarf or something like that. So the kind of interest in it never really left me, even though I wasn't like actively collecting or painting or anything. But when I think it was about 2016, I decided, got a bit of extra spare time. It was before I had my daughter. The job was pretty stable. Had that kind of bit of disposable income, bit of disposable time. And I thought doing some painting in particular would be like a nice hobby, something relaxing, a bit meditative, kind of pick up and spend my time doing. So I bought a box of Space Marines. So that would have been the final edition of the multi-part sort of classic Space Marines, and some paints, and just kind of dove into it, I guess. And that was when Games Workshop were producing Duncan Rhodes miniature painting videos on YouTube. So that was obviously when I was a kid, that didn't exist. And and painting was really following some of the kind of book guides that were produced by Games Workshop. I had one of those, and that's how I painted my models back then. Maybe White Dwarf would have some tips and stuff in it, but I'd never watched a really good painter paint.
Yeah.
The best miniatures that I'd ever see would be at my local Games Workshop, or once I went to a games day. Back when they still did those. I think it was the 98 one in Birmingham in the UK, and that was incredible, seeing some of the kind of big dioramas that Games Workshop brought to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was no better way really of learning than just practicing. But yeah, picking up in 2016 again, when, as I say, Games Workshop were producing pretty good videos on how to pick up painting. And I really enjoyed Duncan and his style of teaching. And from there, I kind of quickly dove into some other online painting tutorials and things like that. Some were on YouTube. Though even in the short time since then, there's been a huge boom in YouTube painters.
Oh yeah.
I think back in 2016 there were definitely fewer. But the ones that I came across that really stuck with me and that sort of inspired me to keep going and keep pushing how I wanted to paint were people like Ben Kometz, who ran a site called Painting Buddha. So he's a multiple Golden Demon winner and various other prizes, and an incredible painter. So his site and his YouTube videos, I remember watching, late into the night, seeing him do his kind of various different techniques that I wanted to practice and improve my skills with. And another contemporary of his, like Roman Lapat, Massive Voodoo was his site, and there was some incredible tutorials then with a lot about the kind of theory of painting, like color theory and how to develop skills and the art of kind of practicing. So Ben and Roman were there to kind of inspire me, I guess, to improve beyond the kind of the base layer shade approach that Games Workshop started out with.
It's kind of nuts, like how much this stuff blew up. Like in my absence, I think the last mini I painted was 2012, and it was that Dark Angels captain that he was like holding the sword like it was the newer version of the old sculpt. So he's holding it like that, and he had the helmet that went on him, and he had the cloak over his shoulder. And I got out of it after that, and never really. I'd poke into Games Workshop's website every so often to see what they were still making, but nothing serious. And then right before a couple years before I got back into it, January of 24, I'd started watching, like, just seeing different painters online or on YouTube, and watching lore videos. Major Kill was one of my favorite guys to watch. He was just really silly about his stuff, but I was completely amazed at like what had happened in the 12-year absence, because like you said, you and I grew up, all we had was the books, and then going to your local shop, and hopefully somebody's got something in the case there. We didn't I never went to a Golden Demon here in the US, but there was a couple of painting competitions I went to as a kid, so it was neat to see other people competing. But yeah, that 12-year gap was just, all of a sudden it went from, like kind of floating right under the radar to just taking off, and tons of YouTubers, painters, people into lore, people talking about gaming, and coming back to it. It was like, wow, there are just so many people into this now. This is crazy.
Yeah, it's a fantastic environment to kind of come into as somebody picking up the hobby. Yeah. Like I worry a little bit like that it might be too much, for some people just being kind of overwhelmed with what's there. But I think, that's kind of the way of the internet, isn't it?
Yeah.
So people are kind of used to managing that. But it's
one of the nice things, one of the biggest things that I think is really cool is like the amount of girls that are into it now. My gal, she's just getting into this stuff. I'm trying to teach her how to paint, and I'm having to like dial myself way back, which is hard. A buddy of mine, I was talking to him on Monday at Paint Night. He's like, "Yeah, dude, you just got to put yourself in your mind to help her where she is." I'm like, "Dude, that was over 30 years ago." Are you kidding me? But no, seeing the amount of women that are in it, and my gal, she follows zero podcasts since mentioning. She follows Louise of Rogue Hobby. She follows another chick that I follow named Gobo Girl. She follows Darcy Bono. There's another chick who does a lot of like Hello Kitty and like cutesy themed stuff, and she's got like another 5 or 6 girls that she's found that she follows, and it's really cool to like, you know, your gal, your wife, whatever, wants to get into it, and it's like, oh, here's a list of like women that are actually into this, so you can have like kind of a shared experience. And you know, hearing of us growing up, hearing of girls into, you know, 40K was very unheard of.
Yeah, it was definitely super rare, and yeah, it's fantastic to see that it's becoming more and more common. You mentioned Louise from Rogue Hobbies there, and she recently did a video on her channel about teaching kids to paint, which I really enjoyed. And my daughter's 6 now, and we painted a few minis together. Went into Games Workshop, and she was excited to kind of put together one of the free minis that they had there, one of the Dark Angels Terminators when they just came out. And you know, we came home and painted that up, and yeah, she's enthusiastic. So yeah, I'm hoping that as time goes on, she picks up an appreciation for.
Has she expressed interest in actually continue doing it?
Yeah, like she knows it's a kind of a hobby of mine, and she always shows an interest. You know, she always asks me what I'm
really
up to,
cool.
like what Space Marine am I painting now, Daddy? So yeah, I think as time goes on, she'll be kind of keen to keep playing around as partly as a way to spend time doing stuff with me.
That's really cool.
Yeah, I look forward to that.
I've just gotten the I never had kids. My gal, she has 2. Her oldest is 21. She's over in Spain studying abroad. She's actually coming back next weekend. And then her son, he's 16, turns 17 this June, and I've never really had the experience of having a shared experience or a shared interest with kids. But her son, like I gave him, he's all of a sudden discovered cars. So he got his license, and I gave him my last car. That was like lightly modded, and it's kind of fun just chatting with him. Like he's really wanting to get like a Toyota 86 or a Nissan 350Z or something like that. So it's fun to have that. But I've never had anyone in the shared experience of like 40K. So it's really cool that my gal's into it. But yeah, the whole kid thing, that's got to be really neat. Like seeing your little one, like, oh my God, I want to be like Dad. I want to be like Pops.
Yeah. I've got a friend whose son he's a bit older than my daughter. He's probably 9-ish, I think, and he's fully into Games Workshop. You know, he's got quite a decent collection. I think Orcs is his thing.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, whenever we meet up with them, he and I chat a lot about about miniatures and painting and stuff. It's quite sweet. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, that would have been like just thinking about growing up. Like, you got into it around the same age as I did. I got into it a little bit before you, but it was always weird being the preteen or the teen who was into it, because like there were so few people our age at the time that were into it. It was usually guys in their 20s or their 30s. So, you know, you'd go to a games event like that, and maybe it's a little different in the UK than it is here in Vegas, but like here in Vegas, I got one of my best friends into it. So he was like my painting buddy growing up, and we're still painting buddies. But like him and I go to a painting event, or we go to a gaming event, or like hanging out at a local hobby store, we'd be like the youngest people there, always. And so it was always kind of weird on the rare occasion when you see like another teenager there. And now it's like so commonplace that it's neat seeing people of all ages encompassing the hobby.
Yeah. Well, in retrospect, that ability for Games Workshop back then to attract kids into the hobby, I think that's the reason why Games Workshop is as successful as it is now, because those kids back then are now us as adults.
There was I don't know. Do you ever watch it was an old podcast. Peach. It was before Peachy went to Jugs. It was his old podcast with the two other English guys.
Yeah.
They brought in some old GM from Games Workshop. He was there in like the 2010s, and he talked about like the whole bunch of different stuff from Games Workshop, like the brushes, the paints, and he's like, he actually talked about the marketing. He's like, do you know who Games Workshop markets to? And all the guys are like, no. He's like, middle-aged women. Because middle-aged women bring their kids into Games Workshop and spend the money on their kids. Mm-hmm. So they get the kids interested, but their big marketing push is to get the middle-aged moms to bring their kids into the stores.
Yeah. Good idea.
Yeah,
definitely. I think if you can get kids in, then as we have demonstrated, I guess, people like you and me, that kind of passion from childhood.
So I wanted to move on to the next question. This is a good one. This is something I was very curious about after looking at all your models with your level of painting. What kind of paints do you use?
I mean, I mostly use the Citadel paints.
Really?
So when I picked stuff up in 2016, I was watching Duncan's videos. He obviously was talking about the Citadel paints. Mm-hmm. That like I imagine for most people was the kind of low barrier to entry, right? You can use the paints that they're talking about in the videos that you're learning. You don't have to think about it, and because we had a couple of stores in town that sold those paints. Mm-hmm. One of which handily was closing down, so I picked up the paints half price from them, which was great. So that kind of began the bulk of my paint collection, really, and it still makes up the majority of the paints that I own. Over time, though, I'd say if I'm buying new paints now, they are often not Citadel ones.
What do you what have you gotten into?
Yeah. The paints that I tend to pick up that aren't those are usually recommendations from other painters, which means they'll be from like a wide range of different manufacturers. So I've got some Vallejo ones, I've got some AK 3rd Gen ones, I've got something else that we'll definitely talk about later, which are like enamel and oil paints. Mm-hmm. That have become a really important part of my kind of painting process. Mm-hmm. But I also have picked up a bunch of the contrast paints from Citadel. When they came out, I was really interested in how they could fit in to what I was doing.
I do actually very much I like their contrast paints a lot. I like they basically brought back the ink washes, but made them so they don't reactivate.
Yeah. No, I like them. We've got a lot of places in the process, mm-hmm. Outside of what they're meant for as well, right? I think we're talking about my daughter and her painting. So when she's done painting, we've used the contrast paints kind of in the way that they were intended, right? Just kind of slopping them on a bit and it looking cool. So I think they're a really good entry level painting system. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure she'll continue to use those until, she levels up her skills a bit. But I also use some slightly weirder stuff. So I've got the kind of chunky bottles of Vallejo metal color paints. And these I think are my favorite general use metallic paints. Mostly they're silver or variations of silver color. They've only got one gold, and it's not very gold. But the kind of the pigmentation of them are spectacular. Like they're very liquid paints, and they're meant for spraying, but they brush on beautifully.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're definitely whenever I'm painting true metallic stuff, I'll use those.
Yeah, I'm still hung on. I'm not a big fan of Citadel's physical paints, but I like the normal layer paints. But I'm still stuck on their metallics. They make great metallics.
Yeah.
I bought some. I was trying to sub out. I wanted mithril silver again, and I wanted chainmail again, like the actual bright mithril silver. And Two Thin Coats makes it, but their paints, their metallics are really thick. And like even if you water them down, they just dry really fast. So I'm going to switch back to Citadel's metallics. I've still got them. They're in dropper bottles, but I tried a few Pro Acryl metallics, and there's a couple of colors that I like, but I found like their gold is really, it's kind of gummy. Mm-hmm. And I versus like Citadel's gold, which just lays right down. Mm-hmm. You don't have to futz with it.
Yeah,
so it seems like I haven't tried those metallics you have from Vallejo yet, but you said they're really thin. I might actually give those a shot and see what they're like if I can find them.
Yeah, they're extremely thin. Like they're much thinner than pretty much any other acrylic you'll pick up, because they are tailored for airbrushing. Metal color airbrush colors is written on the front.
How do they take water?
Fine.
Okay.
But,
like do you find that like if you pool a lot of water in with them, they'll separate?
They separate anyway.
Okay.
Even without that. That's kind of part of one of their idiosyncrasies.
Okay.
If you put them on a pallet and leave them there, they will separate.
Okay. And
you just have to stir them back up again, because they are really liquid. I'm not sure why you would add water to them, but yeah, absolutely, I recommend them. And the gold is an interesting one. Yeah, I've got it here. It's not going to show up that well on the screen, but you can. Oh,
it's just really desaturated.
It is really desaturated. It's got a slight greenish tinge to it.
Okay.
And there'll be use cases where that is what you want. You know, where you want a kind of old, kind of slightly greenish, slightly kind of gross gold color. Yeah. And it's beautiful for that. It paints just as well as the silvers do. It looks fantastic. It's got a great shine to it. But what I picked up from a video online, and I'm not going to remember who it was. I think there are a couple of YouTubers that have been talking about it. Was this stuff. So this is another one of my weird painting editions.
It's like a chrome.
It is.
Oh, Green Stuff World.
Yeah. Chrome. Yeah, this is Green Stuff World Pure Metal Pigments Antique Gold. Mm-hmm. So Green Stuff World have produced quite a few metallic pigments, and they're not all gold. Some of them are silvers. And this is my favourite one of the gold colours that they've got. It is what I think is as close to a natural gold colour that you would see on, a wedding ring or something like that. And if you, because that's a pigment, you've got to mix it. Mm-hmm. So you can mix it with something like Vallejo metal varnish. Mm-hmm. If you want to kind of use it pure, but it also mixes really well with the metal color gold. Mm-hmm. So that kind of gives you a concoction which results in a really kind of natural looking, highly reflective gold color.
I haven't seen that. You brought up that metal varnish stuff. Well, I've never seen that. What is that?
So it's a Vallejo gloss varnish, really, that they just mark it as metal varnish.
Okay.
I have no idea how it is different to their normal gloss varnish. It's a little more liquid, maybe, but yeah, it's kind of meant for if you've done like a matte coat over your miniatures, but you want to bring out the metallics a bit more, because metallics aren't usually matte.
Oh, okay.
Then you could just go over with a little bit of that watered down, and it will kind of give them that shine back. So it works really well as a way of diluting the metal pigments as well, because it adds to the shine.
And speaking of varnishes, like what do you clear coat your models with?
So to start with, I didn't. I guess not surprisingly, I didn't coat them back when I was just picking stuff up again. I painted a handful of ultramarines. I picked up well, you can almost see it behind me here, the Deathwatch Overkill box back from a few editions ago. I got that from that closing down shop at a half price, which was awesome. And I painted up one of the miniatures from that, and I didn't varnish them. And I think as a beginner, that's probably quite common. Using your minis for gaming, and somebody's told you, you should coat them.
Yeah, because you'll wear the paint off.
But if you're not doing that, I think it's quite common just to not realise that varnishing can be like a useful part of the painting process.
Yep.
So that came eventually, and I leant towards a satin. So I used the Vallejo satin varnish.
Was that in a can, or was that actually like brush on, or?
It was just in a little dropper. So this little dropper.
Did you run that through an airbrush, or did you actually paint it on?
I did use an airbrush. Yeah.
Okay.
Remind me to come back to the airbrush thing. But yeah, so I'd use the satin varnish because I didn't fully like the sort of super matte effect that a matte varnish would give. But obviously, nor did I want them to be really shiny, right? Mostly we were talking about Space Marines, and yeah, in my mind, they're predominantly their armor wouldn't be matte. It would have a bit of a sheen to it. Big plates of metal, they're quite likely to have a bit of a shine to them. So I think the satin gave me that. And the satin it kind of also matched mostly the quality of the Citadel paints. So like they are naturally satin.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of how I was used to seeing them. And I think for people just kind of getting into painting, they think, well, what does that really add to it? And I think it adds a huge amount, because naturally each paint that you're using is going to have a slightly different quality to the finish, right? Some of them will be more matte, some of them will be more gloss.
Yeah, it depends on the pigment and the medium going into it.
Yeah. So even back then, when I was just using the Citadel stuff, you would still have that. So as you've got your kind of, if we're talking about Space Marines again, you've kind of got your big flat panels of armor, which will have one finish to them. They'll be slightly satin, probably. And then you'll have your various edge highlights, from the chunky highlight down to the really fine highlights. And each of those will have a slightly different finish. And so you end up with highlights that tend to look too different from the panels that they're highlighting. So the satin
depending on what contrast and shade paints you're using too for the recesses.
Yeah, exactly. So using it like a unifying varnish, if you think of it that way, rather than a protective varnish, that removes that contrast in surface finish, which actually helps blend the colors in together, even though obviously it's not really changing the colors. Yeah. It's changing how your eye is perceiving those colors. And so like a satin or a matte, especially a matte clear coat, will actually diffuse. It'll help to diffuse discrepancies between the color transitions, just because matte is made, it's like the finish of it's porous because it's made to absorb light. Whereas if you use a gloss, it's going to actually accentuate the discrepancies between the colors, because it's a perfect finish. It's a flat, or it's a smooth surface finish. Yeah, that is true. And yes, I think if I was using a matte varnish, it would help to blend those layers and changes in color and even more. But even with the satin, because it has the kind of shine that I think is appropriate for the surface of a Space Marine armor, it does a great job, because it removes that contrast between the different finishes. So yeah, that's what I used. And I still mostly use that on power armor, but so the last Mini I did had quite a lot of fabric, had a cloak, has a tabard, and so I used a matte varnish on the fabric and a satin varnish on the power armor, and I wasn't particularly precious about masking things off to make sure exactly the right parts were hit with the right varnish, because you can't tell all that much. So yeah, just kind of spraying by hand and trying to hit the right bits.
Okay. And you actually go ahead. Sorry. I think
that works. I think that kind of brings it back to trying to play on the realism of the surfaces, where your metallics, unless they're heavily weathered, should have the most shine to them.
Yeah.
Your kind of naturally satin surfaces, like plates of armor, will have a satin finish, and material fabric, unless it's something like silk.
And before we end the first segment, you actually asked me to remind you about the airbrush thing.
Yeah, good. Thanks. Yeah. So it actually didn't take all that long for me to pick up an airbrush after I started again in 2016. So maybe just a year or two. And I bought a cheap kit, like an airbrush kit with a compressor with a tank off eBay. I think it was less than £100. I think something I'd say to most people who are getting into their painting and really enjoying it is, if you can afford a cheap airbrush with a cheap compressor, that's fine. That's fine, because you're probably not going to be using that airbrush to be doing kind of fine detail airbrushing like you might see some people doing on YouTube or whatever. And if you do love it and you want to get into doing that, then you can upgrade your airbrush and use it with the same compressor, the same, So I did that. I think the random Chinese brand was KK Moon, and it was a decent kit. Like, the airbrush worked perfectly fine for doing base, your first base coat or even priming, plus the varnishing. Because I think, through all the horror stories I see of people using spray primers from spray varnishes from cans, I wouldn't risk doing that to my models, because if the humidity's wrong, or you haven't shaken it the right amount, or it's old, or whatever, then so many things can go wrong. I think I've
only ever run into I've heard people talk about with like Citadel's primer, like especially the white primer. I forgot the hell it's called. They've run into that thing where it kind of balls up on the surface. I've only run into that once. I'm in Vegas, so it's usually really, really dry here. But the surface problem thing I ran into was last year for Olden Demon, that the Terminator that's actually on the screen in the right hand corner, his finish was a little weird, because I guess it was probably, I don't know, somewhat humid that day. I got back inside, I'm like, what the hell is this? And it took me a little while with some sandpaper to like chill everything out. I never got everything perfect, but I'm like, yeah, screw it. after it was done and everything was painted and shot and clear, you could barely notice it. But I was like, oh, this is what people are talking about online. But thankfully, like their Munitorm varnish, I've never really run into any issues with that. There is a certain way to, like, I apply it to where I can get a mostly matte finish out of it. It's really a satin varnish. But it's basically three different, you hold it in three different parts of the stream to get a near matte finish. And I'm a little worried that it may yellow over time, but it doesn't smell like their old matte varnish did. And their matte varnish from the 2000s, it's actually destroyed a lot of my models because it's turned yellow. And I'm not happy about that, because there's a few competition pieces that I did where they're ruined because half the model's yellow now.
Yeah, that's sad.
But I think with the formulation they have for the Munitorm varnish, I haven't seen anybody complain about it. It's been around for a while now, and like I said, it smells completely different than that matte varnish did. And I haven't seen any evidence of it changing its clear coat. Like it really drove me nuts. In the 90s, I used to use Raw Partha gloss clear coat, and I've still got models from my teenage years. When I was a kid, my teenage years that were shot in Raw Partha, they still look exactly like the day I shot them. And glossier than hell, though.
I do have a can of the Munitorm varnish, but I haven't been brave enough to use it. I'd probably use it on terrain. painted terrain, like if I wanted to varnish some of that up.
Yeah, basically, if you want to get a good matte finish to it, what you do is you hold the miniature pretty much at the end of the stream and do what I do, which I call dusting. You just get it to literally dust the miniature, and whatever sticks, whatever doesn't, you just wipe it off with a brush, and you actually get a near matte finish.
Yeah, okay, cool. I do use the Citadel sprays for priming. So Chaos Black is my normal primer, and I really like Chaos Black because it's quite satin, like it's on the slightly glossy end of satin.
Yeah, it's the same thing with their white primer. It has a little bit of a satin finish to it. Yeah,
I find that quality in the black in particular useful because, and I think there was a post that we might come across on my Instagram, because it shines in the light. You can use that to take photographs of your model with the light shining from a certain angle. And you can use that as a reference later when you're doing a painting for putting the highlights where they would naturally fall, right? So having that easy first step after you've primed Chaos Black, it's nice and shiny. Come into your room, get a light from your phone or the light from the window, position it where you want it to be falling on the model, take a few pictures from various angles. And then you've got a great reference for later on to show you where you should be putting your highlights. And I think just as like a super easy, every time I paint, this is just the first thing I quickly do, take a few snaps, and then you can get right into it. I find it really helpful later on, especially with stuff like fabric, where I think intuitively, well, perhaps not even intuitively, but often the way that you're taught to paint things is to put shade in the recesses and to put highlights on the raised features, right? But especially with fabric, with folds in fabric, when you look at it in real life, like if you did what I said, for example, and take photos of that after you've primed it, you'll see that some of the strongest highlights are in the recesses. And some of the parts that you might have thought you would want to highlight more on the raised parts, actually you want to highlight less. So I think that's quite a big aha moment when it comes to painting fabric is to remember sometimes you do want to highlight the recesses. So having a reference like that helps you to remember, okay, it's not just put shade in the recesses.
Okay, so we took kind of a deep dive into the paints you use and whatnot, but I think another one that's really good for you is who influenced your painting style?
Yeah, it's a good question. So back when I was a kid, I mentioned the kind of the codexes, the rule books, and things like that, and I mean it's not a surprise, I guess, to say that John Blanche was the kind of biggest influence on me and the models I was building, stuff like that back then. Getting back into it as an adult, we talked about Duncan, Ben and Roman, and they kind of influenced my approach to painting and learning and practicing, which I think has been a really important part of what I've done. And I call my Instagram LukeLearnsToPaint, and that was back then because I was just learning. But it hasn't stopped, right? I haven't stopped learning. And it's funny because, sometimes somebody will post on one of my minis now, like, haha, you should change your Instagram name to LukeLearnToPaint. And it's like, yeah, I get where you're coming from, but I also want to make sure that people know, right? I think you never stop learning.
No,
right?
It's always
even like your Slayer sword winners and stuff like that.
I think it was.
And I'm by no means.
I had a guy, Marcel. I can't remember his screen name. He's like, I think his term for it was always, it's another drop in the bucket.
Yeah, exactly. And I think part of what motivates me as a hobbyist is enjoying, like, improving and learning from other people. And kind of expanding my skills and having the kind of satisfaction of each time I paint a model, having done something new, having tried something different, and expanded on what I'm capable of painting. So I want to argue it definitely still applies. I'm still learning to paint.
Yeah.
So since kind of the early days of getting back into it, I kind of pretty quickly latched on to painting Templars. So I think way back towards the earlier part of my Instagram feed, you can see a period where I painted up. I had only done ultramarines so far, and probably still only like 3 of them. I painted up an Imperial Fist, a Blood Raven, and a Templar, because those were the 3 chapters I was kind of interested in trying out. I liked the look of them. I liked the potential for painting those 3. And I was like, okay, which one gives me the feels? Like, which one do I want to keep going with?
Gives me the tinglies.
Yeah, and it was the Templar, and I think back then I was really inspired by Maxime Courbet. So he's one of the painters and designers in the miniature studio now at Games Workshop. So he had painted up a Templar army, and it had been in White Dwarf with his kind of painting recipes and stuff for them, and I really enjoyed seeing that, and I liked the kind of. I like the Space Knights feel of those, right? And I know you've got Dark Angels as well, but for whatever reason, they didn't appeal to me quite as much. I think Dark Angels have a bit more of the space monk to them.
Yeah, and yes, especially now kind of, with all the hooded robes and stuff like that. Yeah,
and that just didn't do it for me quite as much as the kind of zealous. Rampaging Crusaders, that the Templars were. I thought that was cool, and had a lot of potential for.
Oh yeah, the Black Templars are heavily inspired by like the Knights Templar.
Yeah. So Maxime and his Templars were an inspiration, and back then as well, there were a couple of other fantastic painters that had done some Templars in for Golden Demon, I think, and I'd seen them in White Dwarf, and that was. Sten Frodin, whose Instagram handle is Dweezy, and they were fantastic, and Martin Peterson as well, who's Drink the Paint on Instagram. Both of their Templars were, they kind of hammered that home to me that I was really keen to try and paint those. And back then I was using recipes from them that they put on Instagram or in White Dwarf. So they were more kind of classically like heavy metal style, I suppose. Yeah. I hadn't really been that exposed to much outside of that style. Although people like Ben Kometz and Roma Lepat, they had definitely gone beyond the kind of heavy metal style. But yeah, so I painted up my first proper squad, which was just after the new Primaris miniatures had come out. I bought the launch set for that, and painted up a squad of intercessors to the best of my ability, which is always what I try and do, I guess, when I'm painting a new squad. I wrapped like a piece of jewellery chain around one of their bolt rifles just to give it a little more Templary feel. And put like slight variations in how their armor was painted, like their belt buckles and stuff like that. Just again, because I guess back then I was feeling that each Templar was like a little bit unique, even just the kind of battle line ones. And I really enjoyed it. I think it didn't take long for me though to start seeing other like styles of painting and stuff as the kind of Instagram and YouTube communities around painting grew and grew. And I came across Zach Katskagoon, or I'm not sure on the pronunciation. It was the Grimdark Compendium, run by Kendon Oates, and if you take a look at Grimdark Compendium on YouTube, they also have a site with where you can subscribe or buy access to more detailed tutorial series. But on YouTube, there's loads of great stuff from them, and that was my kind of entryway into like the modern grimdark style of painting. And Kendon really used a lot of enamel paints from like AK Interactive or MIGs, and the speed at which you can get a really kind of evocative paint job, that just look really kind of dirty and grim and nasty, using enamels and or maybe oils. It was inspiring. I really wanted to give it a go, so I painted up the other faction from that launch box set, which was the Death Guard. So that was the new Death Guard range came out with them, and I just began from like a white primer, which seems like counterintuitive maybe to painting something as kind of dark and grim, but using the enamels and the approach that I learned from Kendon and the Grimdark Compendium, was really fast. Like half the time it took me to paint a miniature, using the kind of heavy metal style. And that was compelling, right? That was kind of addictive to get that kind of effect in such a quick time. So I painted a squad of Death Guard in kind of no time at all, and a squad of Poxwalkers in even less time. I think so. Back then, and even now, still kind of, I paint like a standard Space Marine in about 8 hours.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I don't know if that's a lot or if that's
fairly quick. I normally spend I don't know. Usually, like if I'm doing a Space Marine, it's going to take me like 2 or 3 evenings. Like usually spending 6 to 8 hours. But like I've noticed, like, as I've gone along, I've gotten faster just because I've refined my processes. Like for my Blood Angels, I can knock those out pretty quick because I've just done so many of them over the past year and a half that I've refined the process. I know exactly what colors I want to do. I know exactly how the paints are going to react. I know how many steps like to do with like for highlighting the armor and whatnot. I'm going to expand my Blood Angel style of painting for the piece I'm going to do for Las Vegas Open for the painting competition. I'm going to do the Lamartis. Is that his name? The chaplain guy. Yeah. I'm going to do him in red instead of black because I like the old Rogue Trader idea of like librarians and chaplains still being their normal chapter colors. But yeah, I'm going to do him in red and probably like either I don't know, like silver, all the metal thing in like silver, maybe even in bone. But the red armor, instead of just stopping at Pro Acryl orange, I'm going to start mixing in AK ice yellow and bring that real final edge highlight up to like pure ice yellow. Kind of like how you do like almost pure white on the edge of your armor. The ice yellow will do the same thing. Just because I've wanted, like I haven't actually done a competition level Blood Angel yet, and I want to challenge myself to actually do it.
Cool. Yeah, go for it. Definitely. I'm all up for people challenging themselves. I think that's a great way to kind of push stuff on.
I mean, as you said earlier, like it's Luke learns to paint. It's Old Grumpy Wolf still learns to paint. I've been doing this for 30 years on and off, and there's still new stuff to discover. And if you ever think that you have the knowledge of the universe for your painting your miniatures, hey man, that's cool. I'll be over here still learning with all these other people. We'll have fun together.
No, I'm very much for everybody has their own hobby, right? And I don't want to judge. So yeah, if somebody has like hit the level of painting that they are happy with, fantastic. I'm like almost jealous, right? If you are happy, if you are happy with your painting, that's a great place to be. I think that's not my particular version of the hobby.
Yeah, there's every miniature I do, I see something I don't like or something that I know I can improve with the next one.
Yeah.
Or there's something new that I want to try, like a new paint or just a new approach, or like doing like, let's say like gold or bronze on a Space Wolf armor. Like one thing I tested out and I really want to try is base coat it in black, paint it in silver, and then wash over it with, like I don't know, Agrax Earthshade or Gorgunta Fur, thinned out to give it a bronze appearance. Just something new to try.
Yeah. Yeah. So the 8 hours number I gave there. Give that some context, just in case people say, "Oh, that sounds a lot," or "That's quick," or whatever. That's just for the painting. That's not for the basing. That's not for the putting the model together.
Yeah.
It's going to be more than that if it's the first time I painted one, because I'll be getting
do you normally when you paint, do you paint in subassembly?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sweet.
And I try,
assembly crew for the win.
I try my hardest to keep the number of sub-assemblies as low as possible.
Yeah.
So I will glue components together into larger sub-assemblies if I can do. Yeah. I'll try and glue as much as I can to the miniature. But I want to be able to get access to things.
Yeah.
The more careful I want to be with a model and its painting, the more sub-assemblies there are going to be, because I'm like, well, I don't want to risk, getting into this little crevice to paint that bit. If I'm not so fussed about the end result, then, I'll have fewer sub-assemblies and try and get them all in one chunk.
No,
I'm worried about...
Go ahead.
I'm worried about some of the models that I've got in my pile of opportunity, like
pile of opportunity.
Yeah.
Instead of the pile of shame.
Yes. No, I've got a good spin on it.
No, so my biggest concern is like, I always encourage people to pick my models up and look at them. I'm not the type where it's like, no touchy. It's like, no, go ahead and pick it up. He's clear coated. You can handle him. Just try to refrain from dropping him. But like in competition, if I've got judges looking at my models, if they're going to pick them up, I always worry that like, you're going to hold it at a weird angle and there's going to be something that like is unpainted and they're going to notice that. Yeah. So
and they will. Yeah,
painting everything in subassembly for me is like making sure everything is painted. Like my Ulrich Slayer, when I was painting him, I painted him. I put some pieces together, but like his helmet hammer, he's holding the helmet in his hand. I had no idea how much of that helmet was going to be seen if you flipped him over. So I actually painted a hole in the bottom of the helmet. You put it on the model, you can't see it anymore. If you yank his arm off, he's got a hole in his helmet. Just because I didn't want like. In case the bottom of the helmet was visible, I didn't want it just to be, flat color. That doesn't look good for competition. That doesn't look good for judging. It's like, no, if you could see the whole, the helmet at the bottom, you can see the hole. So, it's that little extra detail that's in there. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. For judging, judges will look at every nook and cranny. And, I imagine sometimes if they spot something that you've not been able to paint as well because it was in a tight space, that might be a reason for you not to do as well as someone else. So I think if you're doing competition painting, it's important. So if you're not, and so far I have not done competition painting, so occasionally I have just said to myself, screw it, I'm not gonna worry about that, because this is just for me and my shelf. Which you can see up behind me, like my shelves of minis. So you don't have to worry so much about it. But it's interesting when you get the kind of more complex minis. So I've got the High Marshal, right, and he has quite an intricate cape cloak thing going on over his shoulder and stuff like that, and I have no idea how I'm going to sub-assembly that, because I don't like, what I really don't want is to have to paint two different parts of the same cloak separately and then glue them together after they're painted. And then what do you do with the seam, right? The big...
I have a piece of advice for that. That's exactly how I had to do my Ulrich Slayer, because like his necklace piece that goes across his chest, it includes a chunk of the cape. So I ended up painting the back piece, the big main piece of the cape, and then a little bit of the front. But where that seam was, I just left it the flat color, like the base color of red. And then I painted everything else in the necklace, glued it into place. But the first area that I really focused on getting right into place, because it was such a thin piece, was getting the cape to meet up correctly, let that dry, and then push the necklace over to where it met to the other side of the shoulder pad. And then there was a little bit of a seam left, so I went through and filled it with super glue to where like it bubbled up just slightly. It was a couple of layers of super glue. You can't use Instaset because it'll actually screw the paint up, so you have to wait for the glue to dry naturally. But I built the paint up just a little bit to where it exceeded the plastic, took an X-Acto knife and just slowly and very carefully scraped the glue flat. And then whatever, if there was like a little bubble or something or a little bit of unevenness, I went back through with the base coat color and actually filled in just thin coats and focused on areas that needed filling with the paint, just really thin coats, and filled in areas, little holes with paint until everything was smooth, and then went through and actually highlighted everything on top of it like the rest of the cape did. There are times where I see like what Games Workshop does, where like they do the cloak thing where, you know, it's like two pieces. It's like, crap. But modern problems require modern solutions, and it's not an easy process. But, you know, for people who are seriously into the painting side, you know, we kind of don't mind that. It just kind of comes with the territory. It's like, okay, this is probably going to take about 2 hours just to get to where I can paint it again. But when it's all said and done, you look at it, you're like, ooh, God, that looks good. You can't even tell that was glued together. Yeah, I'm not looking forward to it. But yeah, I think that's a good tip. Or you might want to try it's not green stuff. It's like a white filler. It's like really thin. Yeah, like plastic putty. Yeah, you could try, you get everything glued together, leave everything in base color. That area, just leave it in the base color. Get everything glued together, fill as much as you can with the putty, scrape it down a little bit with a X-Acto knife, and then paint over it. Because I think that putty is primarily white. I think that'll be it. I think I'll practice on some old model and then give it a go. Oh, there you go. Yeah, you just got to be careful with the X-Acto. You just got to really you're going to wind up trimming in a little bit to the paint and some of the primer. Just try to get it as smooth as possible with like really light passes with the X-Acto. It'll shave down the edges of the paint, and then you can build it back up again. Mm-hmm. It takes a little bit, but like once you get the hang of it, you're just like, oh yeah, got it. Cool. Yeah, well, one day when Hellbrecht is my next project, I'll keep it in mind. So yeah, the 8 hours for like a standard Templar standard Space Marine is like, I think about average for me for just the painting. Okay. And just the kind of normal battle line squad member. Well, and also I'm sure that you've got your process down for how you paint your Black Templars too. And it'll absolutely, like if you're just painting like a new recipe for something, or there's part of a mini and it has something new to it that you don't have as part of your process, that really inflates the time for me. Yeah. Like trying to figure out how to approach that. So like on the last mini that I did with the cloak, with the tabard, I hadn't done those using my new process, my new recipes yet. So that really added to the time for painting that for me. So I did want to move into another question. What other question? The influences. Well, no, outside the influence thing was actually this would be a good one because you've seen both styles, you've experienced both styles. Yeah. What are your how do you feel about 90s Eavy Metal Grim Bright painting versus modern Eavy Metal Grim Dark painting? I mean, I love them both. I think you're the first person to say you like really both of them. I think, as we mentioned earlier, I haven't done any like Grim Bright painting yet myself. I guess, I kind of went from the heavy metal style, the kind of modern heavy metal style, through to the kind of modern Grim Dark style. And I haven't had time to kind of go, back, complete the circle with a Grim Bright
painting. But I love that style of painting. Up on my bookshelf, I've got, one of the old Index Astartes from the Rogue Trader period with all of their like amazing different chapter styles and stuff, the different like camo patterns and stuff that they had, and all that like awesome appearances for Space Marine chapters. But not only those, but that kind of Grim Bright style for orcs and stuff that was there when I was coming into the second edition. I love that, and it's got a huge place in my heart. Yeah. I follow a lot of that style of painting on Instagram and stuff because I love to see it so much. It's really it kind of gives you a heartwarming feeling, I guess, somehow, to see that.
Hits you right in the
especially the contrast. Like I love the contrast between that and like the really, and as this kind of grimdark style of painting has evolved over the last few years, and Kendon has kind of broadened the painters that contribute to Grimdark Compendium, and there are some incredible painters that are doing some just insane stuff with particularly like their kit bashes and conversions and stuff, like using real hair and different textures and materials and fabrics and stuff like that as part of their painting and modeling process, contrasting that with the kind of classic Grim Bright style on those old metal miniatures is brilliant. And like I wouldn't want it any other way than to have all of those things as part of the painting community, because I think it would be diminished without any of them. I love the spectrum of painting that I get to see from other people every day.
It's nice that like getting back into this, when I came back January 24, it was nice when I left, like the whole Grim Bright thing, the whole 90s style thing, nobody was doing it. Like there were very few people who were doing it, and like those of us who were doing it, like you post on Cool Mini or not, and you constantly had people saying, "Oh, it looks like a cartoon, it looks stupid, blah 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 blah." And it was really nice coming back into it last year and seeing that the style that I paint in was, welcome with open arms, and the old hammer scene, like it didn't exist when I left, and it just had exploded. It was like walking right back into the 90s again. It felt really good. But I, in agreement with you, I really enjoy seeing the wide gamut of what people have come up with, and just all the styles that have evolved in that 12-year absence, and that there's no right or wrong style. I mean, there's, the competition style tends to lean more toward, ultra realism, and that's all fine, well and good. But the neat thing is, like, no matter what style you paint in, there's something that you can take from every other style of painting to adapt to your style or to teach you something new.
Yeah, definitely. And I love, I love to see how everybody kind of builds on top of what other people are doing as well, and seeing that inspiration kind of spread, and people that had been painting in one style begin to experiment with another, and then they kind of create something new for themselves. I really like that. I think I saw so after experiencing the kind of Grimdark Compendium style, the kind of modern Grimdark, I guess, if you want to use that phrase for it, I came across Christoph Kyle on Instagram. So he's Colonel K03RNL. And he was painting Templars, which I think is when I came across him back then. And he was working towards building a Templar diorama that kind of matched that third edition John Blanche artwork, the most famous Templar artwork. And
Templars were on the box for third edition, weren't they?
Yeah, that's it. That John Blanche cover art.
Yeah, I remember that drawing.
Yeah, I've got it on my wall above my computer behind it. So he was working on creating that, and his style was very much influenced by all of those different aspects, and a lot by John Blanche and that artwork. So he was using purely acrylics, but in a very like painterly style. So like visible brush strokes is something that I really love, actually, in seeing other people's painting. Like somehow it's not my style as much as actually I would love it to be. I'd love to be able to be like.
Well, it doesn't have to be your style, but you can still appreciate it.
No, it's just not. It's not how my brain wants to paint.
Like as an artist, for me, like I tend to I have my own style, but like Giger and Basinski are like two of my favorite artists on the planet, and I adore their artwork. But my brain just can't go into that surrealistic area to create what they create. It would take ages for me to be able to like let my brain go to that surrealism. So you can always appreciate somebody else's style while it may not be like what you do, but again, take from it and appreciate it. Yeah.
So I loved so much what he did with that Templar diorama, and I encourage anybody to look that up. And kind of at a similar time as well, somebody that was painting really inspirational Templars to me was Ewan Watson. So he's Rookery Miniatures on Instagram, and his Templars.
That's a name I know.
Are like peak Space Crusader Templars. Like he has converted everyone incredibly, like with custom sculpting, a lot of kit bashing, again using like metal parts and things like that from brass plates and things to add halos, to add purity seals flowing in the wind, to add banners. He's an artist as well, which really helps. But his conversions and his painting style really inspired like the minute detail. And that's something that I really wanted to try and emulate a bit more in my own painting. And I started to kind of push into that with the kind of recent miniature that I painted. So Christoph and Ewan, they've been incredible inspirations, and I've had the privilege of talking a lot to Christoph about his painting process.
Very cool.
I even have one of his Space Marines on my shelf over there.
Oh, nice.
So that kind of inspiration really helped kind of push me into trying new ways of painting Templars outside of the heavy metal style. So my recent Templars have been quite different to those earlier ones, and I've kind of built in things that I've learned from them and from people like Richard Gray, who's probably one of the most famous award-winning painters, certainly for the kind of Citadel style miniatures predominantly. So his detail and the time and care he lavishes on those miniatures is fantastic. If you have a look at his YouTube, he has some like grimdark style tutorials as well. And I really enjoyed the Templar one that he did there.
Oh, and just heads up, like all the names that you're mentioning, I'm actually writing them down. So when we're done with the show, I'll have you give me a list on Instagram or of like the social media stuff, and I'll link everything down in the description.
Oh, awesome! Yeah, it'd be great to kind of pick up for other people who are interested. But his grimdark Templar recipe on YouTube was really, really interesting, because it was a kind of almost for him like a speed painting process that he went through, right? Because he's definitely somebody that for his award-winning miniatures, he's spending hundreds of hours, if not thousands, possibly painting those. But for that Templar, for that YouTube video, he was obviously using a lot of what he'd learned to take and give advice on like shortcuts that you can make in that process. Because I don't want to be spending that long painting a miniature, because I don't have all that much time. And so those shortcuts were really useful, I think. And he used oils as part of his process as well. So that kind of married in with what I'd experienced doing some of the grimdark painting with some of what that heavy metal background, but also the kind of more painterly, more detailed approach. And that kind of brings us up to where I am now, I guess, with the most recent miniatures that I've been painting, and what has fed into how I've done those.
So I'm very curious as to your thoughts on this, because you actually what we just talked about was excellent. There's two more questions before I want to dive into your Instagram. So this is one of the two. Because you've been around in the hobby pretty much as long as I have, how do you think that the old Games Workshop miniatures from like the 80s and 90s compare to the modern ones?
I mean, they're very different, right?
Oh, yeah.
They're essentially, they're not the same studio, really. I mean, there's probably nobody left designing miniatures that designed those ones from back then.
No, I think Trish was one of the last ones, and she was working in the resin side of things, Forge World.
Yeah, a specialist studio. So yeah, they're a long way apart. But I love the fact that you can still see the lineage, right? That you can still look at a Space Marine from Rogue Trader and know that it is a Space Marine. So somebody that had only seen or experienced the modern world of Primaris Marines, right? And the crazy plastics that go into those miniatures, you could show them for the first time ever one of those Rogue Trader miniatures, and they know what it was.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that. It's not so much of a departure that you can't see the history and kind of look through that process of how they've developed. I do love them both. Uh-huh. It took me a while to warm to the Primaris miniature line.
I'm still warming.
I've got to say there are still aspects, certain features of those miniatures that I might wish were slightly different. But overall, I love them, and I love the detail to them. I love the dynamicism. How dynamic they are. I really enjoy the range of plastics that we've got now. I think, from somebody that was used to, as a kid, to hacking up lumps of metal with a hacksaw, right, to try and convert them. I love now that all you need is a hobby knife and some plastic glue. It's fantastic.
Yeah, the youngins, I hear youngins complain about, having to clean up mold lines and whatnot off their plastic miniatures now. And I was talking to Tim Prow about this in my last episode, and we were both just laughing. It's like, bro, I don't even want to hear it. You ever had a miscast or a misaligned metal mini that takes you 3 days to fix? No. You take an hour to clean up mold lines at most? No, I don't want to hear
it. yeah, absolutely. So I love the modern materials. I love the detail that the modern miniatures have in them. I appreciate the range of minis that there are now. Obviously, there are a huge number more miniatures that Games Workshop produce now than
I do. I'm big on the fact, you and I grew up in the same time period. So back then, like second edition plastics, they tended to be like bargain bin miniatures. And like the detail was nothing, like the strength of the detail was like nothing compared to metal models. Yeah. And I will give Games Workshop credit, like now their plastic models, they're close to rivaling the strength of detail in metal models. Yeah. There's still a few things that they can't avoid because of the injection process. But what we have now, is just light years beyond what you and I grew up with.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think interesting you talk about the kind of detail and crispness there. When you start thinking about 3D printing and the very latest generation of 3D printers, that I reckon are just about there at surpassing the level of detail, crispness, and quality of like the GW plastics.
They're really close. I'm saying I'm going to guess maybe one or two more generations, and it'll be pretty much spot on to what you inject into a mold. However, the biggest downfall will always be, and I'm sorry, my last episode was Beldor Studio. She's the one who sculpted my the frog pope that I painted up. But her and I discussed this at length, and this is also something I'm sure you saw in Louise's Rogue Hobbies video where she started 3D sculpting her own models, is that a lot of 3D designers, they try to cram a ton of detail into the model. And some of the detail is so faint that it barely comes out in the print process. And this is a result, and I was actually messing around with Blender 3D today for the first time, editing a bust to have my local shop printed up. But, you can, as you're modeling, you can zoom in as far as you want. And you think that certain details are going to come out, it's this big on it's huge. You're zoomed into, like, let's say the Aquila. It's huge on your monitor, but when you translate that down to 28 to 32 millimeter models, that detail, you need to get a lot deeper. And where Games Workshop has just absolutely nailed it. I mean, they're modeling all their stuff in 3D anyway, but where they nail it is, I'm going to say about 98% of their detail is nice, deep, clean, easy to pick out, easy to paint. Whereas a lot of 3D modelers, they lose detail because they're not making it deep enough, or they're getting too complex. So no matter the quality of the resolution of the print, you still have to rely on the modeler or the person who's modeling what they're printing to make sure that detail comes out the way comes out nice and solid.
I absolutely agree. There are lessons that people need to learn along those lines, exactly, and that will come with their own experience.
Yeah,
I think you're right. Quite often, 3D modelers tend to produce something that's a bit more detailed than you'd actually want.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was still good stuff out there. I think.
Go ahead.
Those we were talking about the kind of comparison between the modern day stuff and the old stuff. I mean, I love the nostalgia of the old stuff, and we talked about the Gorkamorka minis up there earlier on. I'm going to adore kind of opening those up and putting them together, and maybe not adore putting them together because they are metal. But I'm going to adore seeing them and painting them, and having, because I mean, obviously, like those older miniatures, they're perhaps you could describe them as more characterful, right? They are less realistic. They are more a caricature of a sci-fi mini or a fantasy, if we're talking about the kind of Warhammer world, and there's a place for that. There's a charm to that, and they're normally slightly more simplistic, but I think that's part of why you love them, I guess. So I think, again, a bit like with the painting, I think the miniatures themselves, I like having them around still. I like that it's not too hard to get hold of old Hammer miniatures, old metal stuff. Yes, when you buy one, and if it's still in its box and it says like, £3 on it or something, and you'd be spending like 25 quid on it or something. But so I personally still love having access to that range of stuff.
It's kind of nice that, like, just, all this stuff, especially getting into the 90s when second edition came out, it was the production rates, the yields were so high that it's like this stuff really isn't rare. I hate seeing the stuff on eBay where people just completely overprice the crap out of it, but it's like this stuff isn't rare. It's fairly common to find. There's one miniature I kind of have a beef with, and that's the original Red Gobo from Gorkamorka, but he wasn't the Red Gobo back then. He was just the Gobo captain, but he's been dubbed the Red Gobo, and now people want $150 for that miniature, where it's like, Games Workshop made like hundreds of thousands of these. Really? Oh, all right, fine, whatever. I kind of wish I'd bought one back then, but like I said earlier, I loved the Gobos from Gorkamorka. They were just so animated and fun, and it wasn't until I bought one Gorkamorka miniature and I converted him to a star player for Blood Bowl. But I always loved and adored seeing those old Gobos in White Dwarf and for Gorkamorka, and I wished when I was younger I always wanted to paint them, and I finally got to paint them last Christmas from my gal's Christmas present. I got, I think 5 or 6 of the original Gorkamorka gobos, and just, like they were tiny and cramped, but they turned out, they were just fun because they were so animated and just adorable. And the neat thing is there's actually Games Workshop went back through and resculpted all of them. Yeah. The current Runt Herder box set has, I think it's 10 runts or 10 Gretchen in the box, and it's all 10 of them are from Gorkamorka. They're resculpts of Gorkamorka minis. Yeah, I saw that Games Workshop. I was like, "This is cool." Or Warhammer. I was like, "Oh, this is cool. I'm buying this."
Well, one that kind of reminds me of one of the things that I love about what the miniatures design team have done recently is to release miniatures that so clearly and sometimes explicitly take their inspiration from the kind of old artwork, or even old miniatures from when we were. Oh yeah, like a lot of the new Eldar X-Arches and stuff. Yep. And I mentioned Helbrecht earlier. His new miniature is the old artwork that Mark Gibbons did of Helbrecht. Yeah, and it's fantastic to see that. That's again, that's kind of playing on the nostalgia that their audience has, right? That their adult audience has. Yeah. And I think that's a great idea. I love it. Oh, Mark Gibbons, he was my favorite artist from Games Workshop back then. That guy was just insanely good. Yeah, and it's great. Like you mentioned with the Eldar, also with the Templars. Mark kind of published some of his old concept work that he did for the 3rd edition Templars, and stuff that didn't get made. Didn't make its way into that range of miniatures from 3rd and 4th editions. But you can see how they've used that old concept artwork for the new Templar miniatures. Yeah. So I mentioned Maxime Courbet as one of the inspiration for my Templars. He was part of the team. I think he led the team that sculpted the new range of Templars. Mm-hmm. And he's probably a similar age to us and was exposed to that old artwork and stuff as well, and that's kind of formed his direction for the new range of Templars, and I think that's awesome. I think that's awesome. Yeah, and it's really actually kind of neat to see like before I got back into painting, it was pretty much everything was just generic Primaris Marines, with little add-on bits for Space Wolves or Dark Angels, and then Games Workshop went back. They started doing the customized armies. The first one was Dark Angels, and then came Blood Angels, and now we've got the Space Wolves for the win. But it's nice to see Games Workshop evolving the Primaris Marines to almost 2nd edition level, where Games Workshop brought out, you had the old RTB-01 Sneaky Beakies, and then you had the RTB-15 Mark 7s, and they also had the RTB-09 Terminators. And then going into 2nd edition, they came out with the Space Wolf specific models, and then the Blood Angel specific models, and then the Dark Angel specific models, and generic Ultramarines were always kind of generic. And then as second edition went along, we started getting more character units, more special units, and it's actually nice to kind of see that almost same pattern happening now, because the generic, basically the Ultramarine Primaris were just we're evolving past, First Blood Marines. We're going to, First Blood, or the Mark 7 Marines. We're going to Primaris, and then I kind of figured that they were doing this. All the Primaris Marines initially were generic, and then they started. It's following the same path. It's generic Marines, and now we've got Dark Angels, Blood Angels, Space Wolves. We got Black Templars. God knows what else they're going to do. Probably maybe Imperial Fists. I don't know, but I think their roadmap they published. We've got Imperial Fists. We've got Salamanders. We might have Raven Guard. Yeah, and it's nice to see that they're evolving from that generic template, and it's okay, these things actually have a lot more character in them, and they're a lot more fun now. Yeah, they dropped this. Well, with that first Primaris range, you could see what they were doing. You can understand why they were doing it, and we might have had some reservations, especially in the early days, about how much you liked them over the old ones. There's, obviously there was huge debate about that. When they released the Indomitus box, the next big edition, and they came up with things like the Blade Guard Vets, and really most of the Space Marine miniatures in that box were a lot more detailed. They a lot more purity scrolls, a lot more variation. The Blade Guard Vets have a lot more kind of ornate Aquillas on their chest plates and stuff like that. I think when they did that, you were like, okay, good. Now they're not just plain, really generic looking Space Marines. Now they're kind of starting to introduce that feel of the more kind of gothic, baroque look that I personally enjoy more in my Space Marines, because I think they are that kind of gothic space knight, and I want to see more of that in my minis. And when they brought out the Templar range, that was fantastic what they were doing there, especially with the Sword Brethren. Really, really good. And looking at like the Space Wolves and what they're doing there, most interestingly, I think with the Blood Claws, who are like the youngins, right? They are almost looking like old Mark 7 armor. Like they don't have the kind of knee guard plate.
I hate that knee guard. I think it's so dumb looking. I'm actually debating on I want some of the new Space Wolf models, and I'm debating on actually, because usually the front piece of the leg has the knee guard on it that you have to glue on. I'm debating on shaving all of those off, because to me it looks so much better. And then the thing that I just flipped about was they got beaky helmets.
Yeah,
yes,
beaky helmet. They got Mark 7 helmets. They're missing the armor plating on the top of the backpacks, just like the Mark 7 armor. So fascinating to see a new squad for a new miniatures range that is essentially going right back to pre-Primaris in a lot of the detail.
Well, there's been some arguments that Games Workshop's going to have to do that, because there's too many of us old people involved in the hobby where we want Mark 7 helmets still, and we still want beakies. And the generic Primaris helmet is you can't have every single Marine with a generic Primaris helmet. You need to add variety again. And there are those of us who will get excited and happily buy things that have beakies and that have Mark 7s, because that's what we grew up on. And I mean, even back when in Rogue Trader in second edition, you still had Marines with Mark 4 armor. You still had Marines with Mark 5 armor. Half the Space Wolf characters were in Mark 4 Heresy armor. So...
Yeah, I really like that choice that they're making. Yeah,
I think it's a very good idea.
I imagine you're right that they're doing it knowingly, that they're doing it because they know people want more of that stuff, and when the Space Wolves release was a resounding hit, right? Yeah. I didn't see any negative comments about any part of it. It was just
that new Logan Grimnar is so badass looking. I'm just yeah, boy, he's walking up like he's late to a bar fight.
yeah, he nailed it. I'm looking forward to. Well, personally, I'm looking forward to seeing what miniature they bring out for the Templars when they do the Templar Codex. That's going to not be too far off.
Now, I do want to move into the last question before we jump into your Instagram thing, and I think this is a really good question for you based upon your level of painting. What advice would you give painters just starting out to help them avoid the pitfalls that you experienced?
It's a good one, and I've chatted to a couple of fairly new painters on Instagram who, if anybody ever messages me on Instagram, asking some question about painting, whatever, I always reply, and I enjoy it when somebody who's fairly new to it starts asking questions. Yeah, and I give them some.
It's not an easy thing to get into.
No, there's a big curve to climb, right? Yeah. And the rate at which you climb it, is a personal thing, obviously, and it kind of depends on what you're trying to achieve. So I guess that's one of the first things that I would talk to that person about is what do you want to aim for? What do you want to get out of this? Do you want to, look at in the future look at getting your skills to kind of competition level? Are you happy with just kind of army painting style? You just want to kind of get to a level where you're happy with using them on the battlefield. And then I'll kind of give them some basic tips that I wish I had from the start, which is things like using a wet palette.
Yeah.
Right. Which was a big game changer for me. Obviously, using acrylics for most of my painting, the wet palette means it doesn't dry out whilst you're sitting there painting, which is fantastic.
Unless you're in Las Vegas.
So, yeah, using a wet palette, practicing on thinning your paints and giving a few pointers as to how you do that, because there's no easy equation to it. It's something you kind of do by feel.
Yep.
Giving them some reassurance, right? Like that the most important thing in developing your skill is just practice.
Yeah.
It's just doing more of it, right? As well as exposing yourself to what other people are doing.
Yeah, definitely.
Because then you've got that kind of range of different styles that you might want to take yourself towards, as well as something to aim for, or something to kind of keep yourself motivated, I guess. So those kind of basic things, I would help people to try and understand. Like, it's going to take time. You're going to want to take a look at what other people are doing to give yourself an idea of where you want to go.
Yeah.
And then you start talking about choices of painting style. So the heavy metal style, the kind of more kind of ultra realistic style, or maybe the kind of grimdark style, being the three kind of major paths. Obviously there's the Grim Bright style, but for most people that's not their first choice.
Yeah.
Coming out of the gates. So I talk to them about that, and then maybe, like we've discussed already, give them some pointers of some good resources to go to. So for Grimdark, it would be the Grimdark Compendium for me. For the heavy metal style, it would probably still be Games Workshop or Tooth and Coats, and the Painting Academy and stuff. For starting out, the advice that they give for painters is really good. Really just kind of getting to grips with base coating, thinning your paints, the kind of basic highlighting effect you can do. And then there's the more kind of ultra realistic stuff, like maybe Richard Gray would be doing, or another resource for that I like is the Cult of Paint, and the range of tutorials that they've got. So yeah, I think knowing where to go and look for some like decent quality advice, because there's a lot of that out there, and being able to kind of filter through that is not easy when you're just getting into it.
Yeah, it's definitely an uphill challenge in some ways. However, I will say, you and I talked about this a little bit earlier. Just the plethora of information out there that's so readily available, like tutorials on YouTube and whatnot. As a kid, I never would have dreamt of just being able to plop down behind the PC and just pull up 17 different videos about how to paint an ultramarine. All we had was White Dwarf and the painting guides, and maybe that guy who spent the last 10 years of his life painting Space Marines we never knew about, sitting his miniatures on the case at the shop, and you might be lucky enough to run into him. So yeah, it's definitely a new day and age for the amount of information that you can just readily get. But I think with the amount of painters that you've mentioned and the people that have influenced you and whatnot through the episode, I think that if there's any younger new Hammer kids watching this and they're interested in resources, you've named off quite a few that are really good and that I've heard of too, that I think would behoove them. Like Cult of Paint is an excellent one.
yeah, I mean, if you're watching this and you want to chat about it, then yeah, you can just DM me on Instagram and you can show me what you're doing, and I can give you some pointers if you like.
Yeah, and there's just so it's known, if there's any new Hammer kids watching this, and you guys want advice, most painters out there, like the ones that you admire, if you DM them and ask them, they generally respond, and they're usually pretty open about wanting to help out.
Yeah.
The majority of us, we don't gatekeep, that's just not cool. Like the ones that gatekeep, they generally have in kind of inferiority complex in some ways, whereas the majority of painters, like I found, really want to uplift and help people. Yeah.
I think I'm glad to say I don't think I've ever come across a gatekeeper really. There are people who, and I understand and kind of respect it, but that have like a paywall.
Yeah. And
that kind of method of gatekeeping, if that's their living and they need to make money from giving that advice out on Patreon or whatever they're doing there, then yeah, that is absolutely fair enough. But most people, like if they haven't replied to you, it might be because they've got tens or hundreds of thousands of other followers.
There's also with messages or whatever. They're getting just flooded with DMs.
Yeah. It's I'm sure it's almost always never on purpose that might slip by their awareness. So yeah, if don't be shy. I guess it can't hurt to ask if there's somebody that is doing something that interests you.
Do it. So for the final segment of the show, let's jump into your Instagram feed, and I've already got it pulled up. And unfortunately, I didn't have a whole lot of time today. I barely got to dig through your Instagram, so you're gonna have to kind of forgive me. I normally go through and try to pick out a few things that really catch my eye. Starting out, we can just do this bad boy right here, and talking about your style of painting Black Templars. What really caught my eye about your Black Templars is the amounts of browns and reds that you mix in, instead of just being pure white shaded with gray, or I've seen a lot of heavy metal Templars, they have little bits of red here and there, but you just go full ham on bringing the red straight in. Yeah, definitely. And I think we've talked about the kind of influence on what's kind of brought me to this guy in particular. This is my latest Templar. I love this miniature. I love the fact that it's another kind of nostalgia trip. If you go right to the end, if you skip all the way to the end, you can always come back again. But he's a resculpt of an old, I don't know, second, third, that kind of age. That looks like third edition.
Yeah. An old Marshall from back then. So that's why I added his back banner on, just to kind of bring that nostalgia even more up. So yeah, I love the fact that he was a resculpt of an old one, and they gave you the parts in the box to do the axe, to do the combi weapon.
Oh, okay.
Which was great, really, really nice, as well as kind of bringing it up to date with obviously the kind of modern detail, the modern posing, the three-dimensionality that it has to it.
Yeah.
I thought it was a beautiful one.
You'll have to forgive me. Is that banner? Is that actually part of the banner pole and stuff? Is that actually part of the backpack, or did you make that?
No. In fact, that banner is from an old ironclad dreadnought.
Oh wow!
Yeah. So it's I learn quite an expensive component now, because not many people have that kit anymore. And I liked it because it was big. So obviously it's a dreadnought banner. It's a bit bigger than a regular old school Marine back banner. But I thought it kind of fitted the scale a bit better.
We were talking about earlier the old Hammer versus new Hammer miniatures, and I got in. Tim Prow and I were talking about this a little bit. One thing I really miss about old Hammer minis, second edition, third edition, all the way up till pretty much Primaris, is the banners are gone.
Yeah.
You know, I always thought that was such a
made
deep
me happy.
thing.
Like, again, it comes back to what you were saying about the designers giving you these little kind of tidbits of things that you like. In the multi-part kit for the Stern Guard vets, they give you a back banner. So even now in the very latest kits, they are kind of giving you that little nostalgia hit of giving you a back banner if you want it.
Now, since this is more or less a display piece, you had mentioned earlier that you wanted to talk about oil paints, and I'm assuming that you use some oils on this guy.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you were asking about the color choices, and the oils really come into that. So this mini reads warm, as you were saying, right? Yeah. This isn't like a cold black Templar, and I think the kind of main the main desire that I have for these Templars is that they evoke that Blanche feel, that kind of third edition box art,
browns and oranges,
feel, right? Obviously, because I am not the same kind of painter as John Blanche or somebody like Christoph that we were talking about. The kind of painterly aspect to that art is not quite what I've got here, but I definitely want that kind of feel to it, and that artwork is warm, right? It's like most of Blanche's artwork. It's kind of ochres and reds and yellows and browns, so I want my Templars to have that feel to them, that they're from that kind of world. So there's a lot to this miniature that kind of feeds into that. Part of it is the use of the red, right? That's kind of easy way here to warm up the miniature, because most reds are warm, and the ones that I've used here are definitely. And there's a little tip as well to throw in, that I've painted these reds with a fairly standard red recipe. They're mostly the Citadel red colours, going kind of from kind of corn red up through Mephiston and Evil Suns and beyond. I think the highest highlight is Fire Dragon. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But then what I've done with them is to glaze them with Baal Red contrast paint. So Baal Red is one of the latest.
You thin that way down.
Yeah. So it's heavily thinned with just water.
Yeah.
And it's one of their kind of pure pigment paints, so it thins well because it's very heavily pigmented.
Yeah.
And you get a really good translucency to it. So when you glaze over with that paint, it suddenly like really punches the red right up. It becomes a really vibrant, strong red.
And it gets rid of, like, where you use the Fire Dragon Bright, it gets rid of it helps to tone down the orange of that color.
Yeah, got it. Exactly. So it doesn't change the value too much, the kind of lightness. It doesn't affect that much, but it does bring it way back to being red and not orange.
Yeah.
It also, any glaze that you do also helps kind of unify those colors a bit more. So where the highlighting might have transitions that you don't love, glazing that over it is going to help, conceal some of that. So those reds really help with the warmth, and I use red possibly a bit more, as you say, than some other Templar painters. So I tend to say with my Templars, right, you've got four main colors, I guess. You've got the black, you've got the kind of white / cream, and for me you've got red, and then you've got some metallics, right, gold or silver, some mixture of those things. So primarily you'd be looking at those colors. Sometimes there'll be the odd little spot of something else because some part of them requires that, but not all that often. So on this guy, you've got a hint of yellow. He's got that kind of hazard striping pipework just on the edge of his face mask. And that yellow is going to be more predominant in some of the miniatures because, again, looking back at the Blanche artwork, the yellow is featured there for like special weapons, flamers, melters, plasma guns, stuff like that.
Well, and you've also got like, you've got the golds to tie into the yellow as well because it's the same area on the color wheel.
So yellow is going to be something that features. But for the rest of the miniature, where essentially you've got white and black, you can take those things in whatever direction you want, right? They could be quite cold, or they could be quite warm. And with the black, the highlighting that I've got there kind of takes you up through kind of a greenish blue into slightly neutral blue-grey territory. And so you end up with something that's a little on the cold side. And with the white, the highlighting is a bit more on the kind of slightly neutral brownish side, or shading, I guess I should say. Shading is a slightly more neutral brownish. But the warmth has come from the oil paints in both of those cases, right? So on the black, I'm using a thinned oil wash of mostly raw sienna, but with a little bit of
that's where I figured you were playing with oils, was in the crevices.
Yeah. So that wash is an all-over wash, all over the whole of the black armor. So I spray it with a satin varnish, just to make sure the surface texture, again, more than protection, the surface texture is unified. So that oil wash, is going to adhere in a uniform way across the black armor. Yeah. And then after it has dried to the point where it's not kind of glossy looking anymore, the oil wash, I use a Q-tip, a cotton bud, raised surfaces just to lift some of that oil wash off. Yeah. Because it's really thin, it's not going to have made a huge color difference, but it does slightly stain the surface of the material, right? Because it's not a gloss surface, it's a satin one. So it will slightly adhere to that and slightly stain it. And that's where some of the warmth comes back into the armor. So the fact that I've removed it from the raised surfaces means that they don't look as brown. They look slightly brighter. They kind of keep that sort of more neutral color. So that's the reflectivity. That's the light hitting them. I don't really want that to be that brown. Yeah. But where I haven't lifted that stain off, so that's the recesses definitely, but that's also like the shadows or the underparts, which aren't recessed. I'll leave that there, and they will have that kind of browner appearance to them. Yeah. So you also do that on the white areas too to give it that unification. So I use a different color on the white. So the white is burnt sienna and burnt umber, so not raw sienna. And I'll use those to stain the surface a little, although importantly with those ones on the white, I don't use them all over. I will use them on the kind of the lower parts and in the recesses, because I don't want to stain the very highest, brightest areas of white at all. I want to leave those. But yeah, with the kind of lower parts where I want them to look a bit dirtier, a bit more weathered, I leave them there. Yeah. And adjust it a little bit as I want to. And as I guess you can see from the model, I also will like splatter the oil on.
I thought that was a really cool effect.
So that's pretty easy to do just with like a paintbrush and a toothpick or something. Yep. So if you get some of the oil paint on the toothbrush and then use the toothpick to just kind of strike against the edge of the brush. Yep, and just let it splatter. Will then give you that nice spatter. I mean, definitely practice it somewhere else first. Because although it's oil paint, it's pretty easy to remove. You don't really want the job of having to go back in and wipe it all off again.
Yeah, that, and you want to kind of avoid getting in your carpet.
Yeah. So those warm, earthy browns from the oil paints that I use for the weathering, but also to stain the black, they help to kind of warm that up as well.
Yeah, I wasn't entirely sure if you were working, if you were actually doing that with acrylic and working upward, like using contrast paints to create that depth, around the recesses of the shoulder pads, around, the bottom of the banner, around his loincloth. And I almost thought you were using, it's an AK color. I think it's called Hull Rust or Rust Hull or something. It's basically a terracotta. I thought you might have been using that as like glazing it on between the armor plates. It wasn't until, you and I talked that I found out you were using oil paints, which I think is actually really cool.
Yeah. I mean, you definitely can do. Yeah. So I mentioned Christoph or Colonel. So he only uses on his Templars back then. He only used acrylics, and he has that same effect. So I think he created a wash using I want to say it's Doom Bull. I want to say that. So he created a wash with Doom Bull. Yeah, and he washes that over the base coat, and he then kind of dry brushes the black back in. Mm-hmm. So that you get that Doom Bull left in the recesses. Yeah. But the black still reads as black. So that's like a neat trick if you don't yet want to break into oils, and I'd encourage you to do that. But if you don't want to break into that, there are definitely techniques to achieve something very similar using just acrylics.
Yeah, I use Doom Bull for my base rims. Because it's the closest thing that Citadel, when I was buying paints, it was the closest thing I could find that Citadel made that used to be terracotta. And then I discovered AK's Rust Hull, which is it's slightly brighter. Actually, I dug out. I wanted to do a paint comparison today to some of the colors I had, mainly because I wanted to compare Citadel's old blue gray and Space Wolves gray to the two colors that I use from War Painter for my Space Wolves, and they're actually like a spot on match. But I also dug out my old. They're all dried up, but I can still compare them in where it's dried out in the paint pots. I dug out my old dried out pot of Goblin Green, compared that to the two Goblin Greens, one I have from AK and one I have from Tooth and Coats, and then the old dried out terracotta. I compare that to Doom Bull, which Doom Bull is a little bit darker. And then the AK paint I have, which is, it's like maybe a half a shade darker than the original terracotta. Mm-hmm. But, like old habits die hard. Mm-hmm. You kind of get used to using certain colors. Actually, one question I have for you, and I've been very curious about, because I want to get better at it. What are you, his belt pouch, the leather on his, his belt and whatnot. What colors are you using for that?
So it's a pretty basic set of colors for the leather, really. I don't spend all that much time on it. So I base coat it in Rhinox hide. Okay. And with my minis, there's kind of a point at which I take all of the acrylic painting before I then do the washes, mm-hmm. right, the oil washes. And with the leather, I just take it to Rhinox hide. So I do the Rhinox hide, then everything will get their oil washes, including the Rhinox. So that'll be washed with the burnt umber. Okay. And then I layer what goes on top of that. Doom Bull. That's the kind of broad highlight, mm-hmm. and I'll thin that down a fair bit, so it's more of a glaze, really. And I'll do maybe just a couple of glaze passes, bringing out the raised areas, because I don't want a sudden jump into Doom Bull, because it's quite a lot brighter than Rhinox. And after that, the kind of the edges and some of the scratches I'll do in Steel Legion Drab. Okay, that's for me, highlighting up leather. I usually start with I was doing Doom Bull brown and then highlighting up with a Vallejo color. It's a yellowish brown. It's basically what Citadel used to call Orc brown or Spearstaff brown. Yeah. And I also use Scrag brown, which is kind of a yellowish orangey brown, as part of the highlighting. But yeah, I don't spend too much time on it. It definitely kind of fades away a little bit.
No, I've been trying to find a happy medium where it doesn't go. Well, I found an AK color. I don't know the name off the top of my head, but it resembles snakebite leather pretty close. And I've been trying to find something that's a remake of snakebite leather, not the contrast color, but the original color. And I think I found it, but I've been trying to find something to highlight up with where it doesn't go like pink or it doesn't go chalky.
Yeah.
So I really like your leather, so I'll have to give your leather formula a shot to see how it works for me.
This shot that you've got shows some of that black armor weathering, and I should say that the weathering doesn't end on the black with just the oil wash. So I use pigment powders.
Oh, okay.
I use them on the base and on the black, and on the metallics as well.
Oh, okay. So that's how you get that kind of faded look.
Yeah. So the pigment powders I don't use raw. I turn them into washes. So I just mix that powder with water until it's...
I have a very good question for you. With those pigment powders, like when you put them on the base, or like what you put them on the model, the feet, the base, wherever you decide to use them, can you actually varnish over them?
Yeah, you can, but it does change how they appear a bit. So again, one of the effects that a pigment powder gives you is a difference in surface variation, right? In finish, because I'm putting it on something that has a satin varnish, which I would have done, by the way. I would have satin varnished it before I put the pigment powders on. Because you're putting it on top of that, suddenly you have a satin surface that has a very matte powder on it, right? So that's part of the effect that I want personally. And if I then varnish that with anything, it would unify the finish and that contrast would go. You wouldn't get the difference.
So because it's a powder, does it, like, I'm assuming that like there's no bonding agent. It's literally a powder.
Yeah, it is just a powder. So you can use something called a pigment fixer, which most places that sell the pigment powders will also sell. I don't use that. I think that's just a slightly tacky water essentially that's got something in it that makes the powder stick a little bit more. But I do just use water.
I vaguely remember, like in college, when I had a full minor in traditional art. I hate I hate working with charcoal and pastel because they're just messy. But it was called workable fixative. And when you were using like either charcoal or pastels or even like pencil stuff, like when you got to a certain point with the drawing where you wanted to like affix everything in place, you'd spray it down with this workable fixative, and it was a matte coat, and it wouldn't actually ruin the more powdery mediums that you were using. And I've seen a lot of people use powder mediums on miniatures, and I've just been very, very curious as to like if they have any kind of bonding agent in them, or if like when you spray them down with varnish, does the varnish actually ruin the powder on the, because you're mixing a liquid kind of in with a powder, does it ruin or clump the powder on the miniature?
So I think if you're just spraying it, I don't think it would clump or anything like that, but I think it would end up just looking like paint again. Okay.
But at least like it does genuinely actually seal it in place though. So you can touch it and it's not going to smear.
Yeah. So the way that I've used the pigments here, like I say, I just mix them with water and I kind of wash them into the crevices. I use a couple of different kind of orangey browns, both from Vallejo, so one called Rust and one called Dark Brown Ochre. I use those in the recesses quite carefully, although you can just use a wet brush to wipe it off if you get it anywhere you don't want it to be. But because it's in the recesses, like you can still pick it up, and so long as you're not jamming your finger into the recesses, it's not going to come off. So I'm happy with it. I prefer how it looks this way because it still looks like dust, which is what I want, and it's not really going to come off.
Oh, thank you very much for answering that, because I have been completely like, duh. I have no idea about it. Oh yeah, that was actually one thing I wanted to talk about was your your Necrons. I think these things look badass.
Yeah, we haven't talked about them at all. They kind of came in between the latest Templars and the Death Guard that I did. And yeah, I got these guys through another one of the new Starter Edition boxes, and I liked them. I came across some people that had done this kind of fluorescent red glow instead of the classic green.
I was going to say, like, you don't normally see that people doing fluorescent red on Necrons. It's usually like kind of like blue or green.
Yeah, exactly.
It gives them a very sinister appearance.
And I like that. So yeah, I was kind of pondering, like, how would I get these guys done in a way that isn't going to take loads of time? And essentially, they're entirely silver, shades of silver, weathered using there's not much oils on these guys. I was just about to ask that. Yeah, so they're mostly acrylic. So they kind of the metallic is weathered down with washes of Black Templar and non-oil and stuff like that. So the oils are mostly on the gold. So the gold has weathering from I can't remember the dark oil I used on it. Might just have been black, but also that green. That's an AK oil. Which I love. It's fantastic. So just sort of thin it slightly, wash it around, remove it a bit from where you don't want it, and you get this beautiful kind of patina green color. Oxide. So most of these guys are really, really quick. Like, getting the silver to look pretty dirty and grimy takes a few different layers of dry brushing and washing and making it look kind of murky and gross.
I just did it with
the gold, super quick. But the red, so the fluorescent, the glowing bits, they take the time on these guys. I
can imagine it's a thin pigment, so it takes a little while to build up. Yeah.
It's not too hard to do, but it does just take a while.
Are you undercoating the red and white?
Yeah, so I start by undercoating the red in red. So I use Mephiston red and kind of glaze it into the areas that I want that red appearance to be, because that kind of gives you that like a good starting point. Then I'll run a thin white, and back at the time I used a white ink from Liquitex. I run that into the recesses, and because it's very thin, it does run in quite well. You don't have to tidy it up that much. And then, as you imagine, then I use layers and layers of fluorescent reds and oranges to get the glow to come back. And then a little bit more white, just to bring the kind of the heat into the kind of brightest parts of it. Nowadays, I think I'd probably use white oil to do that recess work. Because a white oil will run in there really easily, and you can tidy it up really easily. But the ink was fine. And again, if you're not into the oils yet, using a white ink is great for that.
I really like how, like, on his crown, the three red dots, the red dot on his hand, and then like the bulb at the right before, at the top of the staff before, the axe blade, like how you have, the white points in there that, you've kind of glazed over with red, and they appear just really bright, like almost like I don't know, like almost like a laser shooting out of it. Yeah, like
fun. I think they're really effective, and they were, that process of doing them meant that they were a lot quicker than any of the Marines that I'd done, the Death Guard or the Templars, much quicker to get through.
It's kind of interesting, like how you develop, like a set of skills with, something that you're familiar with painting, and then a lot of those basics, translate over really well to other models. And you can, change up the colors that you're using with them, and you still get, you can get drastically different effects just based upon the color that you're using.
Yeah, it's like I love that. I'm looking forward to, looking forward to painting more of all of them. If we take a look at the Death Guard quickly, maybe that can be the last one that we take a peek at, because they're nicely different.
Yeah, these guys really like just, I was scrolling through your feed right before the show started, or I'm sorry, right before I went to the gym. And yeah, I'm really not a fan of Necrons. It's interesting to me, but it doesn't really appeal to me. But like with what you did with your Necrons, I just like how, how the use of reds, like how sinister it makes them look.
Yeah, that's kind of what caught my eye, because I saw somebody else using the red, and I was like, they look properly evil. Like the green makes them look quite alien, which I get that, and that's cool.
Well, yeah, they've had that. I mean, you remember the original, the god awful original Necron metal models that they released, but it's always been a staple of Necrons that they're silver and they have neon green.
Yeah.
And it's nice to see, like, when somebody just completely changes it up like you have, where it's just like, that the colors that you use in your models will actually change how the human brain perceives them when it looks at them, and the way that you've used the red is, as we both said, just gives them a very sinister appearance.
Yeah.
So it'd be actually really interesting to see those on the tabletop or just in a display case, just to see what they look like with, like not a black background or just with different lighting. But even this guy, like his little spider dude down there with the red that you used on his central eye bibble. I like how I was, I keep forgetting you can't see my mouse pointer. I like how you have, the red, it's almost like a C shape. It really leads your, like initially you look at the model and your eye either goes to the Necron's eye or his staff. And then because of the way you've distributed the reds through the reds through the models, it guides your eye completely around both models, from top to bottom. It's a really neat effect, and it's really good eye flow. Yeah,
thanks. Yeah, I like, it was interesting with them to choose where to use the red, because they have so many opportunities for it, so many kind of channels through their armor that you could make glow if you wanted.
Yeah, I think it's one of those that old saying, less is more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent choice. Let's go digging a little deeper. I apologize. So with the browser on my OBS software, when I click off an image, it just shoots straight back to the top of your page. So that's why I have to keep scrolling down. Ooh, that's a neat guy.
So these were the last of the kind of classic Marines that I painted, and it was a proper Crusader squad. So there were no oils on these guys. This was before I started using that with the Templars.
Oh, okay.
So these are kind of a weathered heavy metal style, I suppose. And you can see I've got more of like the surface highlights on their armor.
Yeah.
Which was something that I picked up from a Darren Latham video on YouTube back when he had those up. And he painted some Templar armor and added in these kind of not edge highlights, but panel highlights. And man, they took a long time. Yeah. They took a really long time. So having done them, and I was pleased with them, having done them, I was like, okay, I need to come up with a new way of painting these that is quicker.
Yeah, getting the balance on those spectral style highlights correct is kind of a pain in the butt.
Yeah. So I think I'm really happy now with those latest intercessors that we saw and the Marshal.
Yeah.
With how the black looks, and I think that's how it's going to stay for my Templars now. I
like your choice of yellow for his flamethrower.
Yes, all the special weapons are going to be yellow.
Oh, cool!
Homage to the Blanche artwork, where he's got the same.
I mean, that's almost kind of also an homage back to like second edition, when like all the flamers were yellow, bright neon, just bright yellow.
Yep, I like it.
And there's one compliment that I get a lot on my Blood Angels is that I always do their weapons in yellow, and people are like, "Oh, we've never really seen that before." And it's just, for me, it was a way of incorporating a warm color, like a warm bright color, to break up the red, as opposed to doing the bolts are in black. Whereas, like the way I do mine is the chestaquilla is black, the tubes and the stomach tubes are black, all the recesses there, the black lining, the recesses, the rubber are all black. And it was just I was like, how do I break up? Well, I think it came from the chain swords back then, back in like second edition, because I think Blood Angel chain swords traditionally were yellow. And I was like, screw it, I'll just start doing the bolters and all the weapons in yellow.
Yeah, it was a great choice.
Thank you.
Whilst you're looking for the next thing, for the Templars, like the battle line weapons tend to be, well, for my guys, they'll be silver. They'll just be kind of metal, raw metal. The special weapons will be yellow. And some of the weapons are going to be red. So like some of them. Yeah,
this guy, like I like your Nurgle a lot.
It's good. I like them too. So the first squad that I did were very slightly different to this guy, particularly in the green, the quality of the green that's there. So this guy and the other special characters that are on this same post, or at least I think they are. No, is this all this guy? Okay, well, we can look at the other ones in a minute. Yeah, it's a slight evolution of that first Death Guard scheme that I've got. So these guys are heavily influenced by the enamels that and oils that are used on them, and this was the first project that I experimented with those. And again, that, as I mentioned, that was from the Grimdark Compendium and what I learned from those YouTube videos. So they start out with that undercoat of white. And then you kind of block in the base coats on anything that isn't going to be that kind of dirty cream color. And after that, it's just slapping on the enamels and oils and working them to kind of modulate that color. And you end up with something that is very quick to do. So like I say, about half the time of my kind of Templar approach. But still really effective, really cool. I love the way that they.
The thing that really stood out to me was you actually decided to go with the traditional Death Guard armor, which it used to be like white with a green tint. Yeah, and you don't see that very often. And then like you're incorporating the decay into the gold or the bronze on the armor, that the teal, the weathering. I honestly can't say that I've really seen anybody do what you've done with your Death Guard. This is really cool.
Yeah, they're definitely not wholly my own creation. I think, possibly there's nobody that's done them identically to this, but a lot of what I've used here came from those Grimdark Compendium.
You said there was a post with there's characters in it?
Yeah, maybe if you...
Nope. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, if you flick through this one, you should see some shots of the others. So yeah, I like the kind of gloss black eye lenses, that kind of like void almost that you see in that, and that makes it easier to paint as well.
Okay, that's like that plasma gun is like almost like the old orc plasma gun from second edition.
Yeah, it is. It's cool, isn't it?
Yeah, I think going with the black eye lenses, that's actually a really cool idea. It's just kind of disturbing. Yeah. One
thing that you might not immediately notice is that there are no Nurglings.
Oh yeah.
I've removed them all, and I know that some Death Guard players are going to say that's not quite in the spirit of the modern Death Guard from the lore and stuff like that. Certainly, if you read stories about them, like the kind of slightly goofy nature of Nurgle is a big part of that. So the demons they're all quite silly, honestly, and that's fun. But I wanted these guys to be a bit more disturbing, so I removed the Nurglings because I thought they detracted a bit from the disturbing nature of them.
I think there's only one Nurgling I like, and that's the sassy Nurgling.
Yeah, he is awesome. Yeah, I don't think I own him. I've kept the Nurglings. I don't know what I'll do with them. but yeah, so I really enjoy playing with these guys, and I think the next ones that I do will be even better. I'm going to modulate the color on the armor a bit more, so the cream is not only dirty from the grime that's on it, but it also has subtle like shifts into pinks and greens over the different surfaces. I've also got some new rust effect paint.
Oh, cool!
Like the dirty down rust that has kind of done the circuit. It's quite popular with grimdark painters, and gives you like a natural rust, like it actually is rust.
You're talking about that. Do you watch Midwinter Minis at all?
Yeah.
So you saw the giant Great Unclean one they did?
Yeah.
Oh, that thing is so damn cool. But yeah, you're talking about that rust effect thing. They had that paint that they were using on the weapons that had the crackle rust effect in it.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking forward to doing some vehicles. So I've got the Blight Hauler, the Plague, the bloat drone thing as well. They're going to be interesting because you've got bigger surfaces. So I'm going to use some like texture paints and crackle paints and stuff to get more texture, and do more chipping. Like I might use chipping medium to get more kind of chipping on there. I may
actually, I think I might borrow or take a shot at your style of painting Nurgle. I bought there's a guy on Facebook I found. He's down in Arizona, one state over from me. He ended up 3D scanning a bunch of like old second edition models, and he 3D scanned a bunch of the Nurgle stuff.
Cool.
Including like the original Death Guard, the original metal monopose Death Guard, and I never got to paint one of those, so I've got a bunch of second edition Plague Marines floating around that I need to paint up, and I think I might try to borrow your paint scheme and give it a shot, because I really like that you went with the white armor on them how they originally were, as opposed to like the modern time where it's green.
Yeah, I also prefer it, I guess. Not surprising that I prefer it because I did it this way. It's a little bit different to the Heresy armor because their pauldrons are not green. I think that was mostly through laziness, I guess, because that would just be a bit more. I think it looks great
the way it is.
Yeah, I'm happy with it.
The one thing I always loved about painting, I have some of the old plastic monopose Nurgle Marines that they brought out in second edition, and I painted 3 or 4 out of the whole squad. I got one left that I never painted when I was a teenager, but I remember I loved painting them because you could just go bananas with like all with inks, making stuff run out of the tubes and making their armor panels. One's green, one's brown, the other one's white. And you didn't have to be like super uniform. You can make them super grungy and decayed looking. It was just so much fun to paint.
They are fun. Yeah, they were just entertaining to paint. Fast, satisfying. They look great at the end. Yeah.
Sometimes it's kind of nice. I finally sat down. I hadn't done this since I was a teenager, but I finally the Blood Angel Sneaky Beaky display that I made. The three of them. I think the 3 in the front. I actually sat down and batch painted those, and it was a test of patience because I'm not used. That's the first time I've batch painted something. Now getting back into painting again, and it was kind of bugging me. But after everything was painted, everything was clear coated, and just I got to put all 3 of them together at the same time, and I was like, okay, wow, I just feel like I accomplished something. This is really cool.
That is the pleasure of the batch paint, is when you get to the end, suddenly you've got a whole bunch of really cool stuff.
The Final Fantasy fanfare battle win music played, and then a little thing popped up from the corner of my vision that said, "You have unlocked batch painting." What else can we dig through really quick that I wanted to chat about? You were talking about going back in your history a little bit, and I was since you mentioned it, I was curious about your Ultramarines. I want to see what you did with those. These, I'm assuming these 2 are yours.
They're all mine. Yeah, but
okay. So okay, that's exactly what you were talking about. The 4 that you painted up.
Yeah. The Ultramarine, Blood Raven, Imperial Fists, and the Templar.
Oh, I like your Blood Raven. That's really cool looking.
And it was Paul Norton, his recipe. So one of the heavy metal painters on Instagram. He's a Junta Paul Powell, something like that. So yeah, I liked it, and that was, I mean, something that I loved when I was younger was the Dawn of War series.
Yeah,
Blood Ravens. A big,
that first game was awesome.
Yeah, they got a place in my heart. So
yeah,
I printed up some Blood Ravens decals for his pauldron, which you can't see there, but
they made up Blood Ravens for that game, didn't they?
Yeah.
Okay.
They did.
And now they've become a staple.
Yeah.
I'll have to I'll have to find it. I've got it saved, I think, somewhere on my phone on Instagram. There's a really funny animation about Blood Ravens. I'll send it to you. It uses they're Blood Ravens trying to steal a TV from an Ultramarine.
Oh yeah. I mean, I was going to say, is it about them stealing something?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course it is.
There's another one where it's like an Ultramarine's rolling down the street and there's two Blood Ravens on the corner and he notices them and he rolls up his window and locks his door on the Rhino.
Yeah.
I've never gotten that. So what is it with the whole stealing thing with Blood Ravens?
I don't, I think it's something about the fact that they don't know their history. They don't know where they came from. So they acquire stuff that they think is going to give them some insight into that. Yeah. So I don't think they don't just steal stuff for no reason. They've got reasons for their.
Oh, I think. Did you get this from? There's a guy who draws the style on Instagram.
Yeah, you can see the first.
RJ Mason. Yeah.
So that I loved his series of helms that he did. In fact, I've got the Death Guard one that he prints. But he didn't have a Templar one, so I asked him to do one, and he was kind enough. I paid him obviously, but he was kind enough to do one for me. Yeah,
he randomly popped up in my feed as a suggested post, and I really liked his artwork style, so I started following him, and it's really neat to see all his 40K artwork pop up. He does some really cool stuff.
Yeah, he does, definitely. I've got that one that I commissioned. I've got one that the Death Guard one that he printed, and I've got three prints of other illustrations that he's done.
Oh, okay.
That I get from Archie's Forge website. So Archie's Forge is like a 3D printing house where they sell loads of cool components, but they also sell some of his prints that he does especially for them. So that's quite cool.
I think the last one we'll talk about is this guy, just because I really like him. I'm starting to fade. It's like 3 in the morning for me.
Yeah, liked him. So his torso is a third-party resin component.
Oh, okay.
That has a little bit of tabard on it. And so the kind of lower part to his tabard is one of the few bits of green stuff sculpting that I've done.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, the lower part is just a piece of green stuff that I've kind of flapped over there.
Yeah, I kind of wondered why I didn't recognize his torso at all. Yeah.
It was from Spellcrow.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what they're doing these days, really, but they had a little range of kind of old school Templar bits. So he's got the old Vanguard veteran legs. He's got the Spellcrow torso. He's got a Templar helmet. He's got a Templar scroll thing on his back there. His bolt pistol is from the old Templar upgrade kit.
Yeah, I really like the pose that you chose for him too.
Yeah,
with the
I definitely want
the chainsword going across his torso.
I mean, I spent so long posing that squad. There's quite a few of them. Is there
the other
10?
one?
Maybe there's 10.
That one was really cool too. I dug that.
Yeah, there's 10 of them in that old school squad, Crusader squad, and they're all different. Plus 2 scouts as the kind of what are they called? Young ones, novice. It'll come back to me. And yeah, they're all different, and they're all made up of loads of different bits from loads of different kits.
Oh, okay.
A lot of them have got the Vanguard Vet legs, but some of them have got Death Guard legs. Not Death Guard, Death Watch. I wanted to try and make them as tall as I could, because back then I didn't particularly like the kind of squat style of most Space Marines. So the running ones tend to be a bit taller because they're not squatting.
Yeah.
And the Death Watch ones are a bit taller just because they were kind of newer sculpts.
You want to talk about squatting Marines, go back to the RTB01s, man. Those boys will be throwing it back.
Super squatty, yeah. So yeah, there are loads and loads of different bits of these guys. Getting this guy's arms and his sword. That was interesting.
It's never quite easy to get like the double-handed sword thing right, because getting those hands to line up with the hilt, it's just like, oh god, this is a test of patience. Yeah, but just then I like how I like the way that you do you can't see my mouse. I keep forgetting that. I really like your choice, the way you do the eye lenses for these guys. How they're just insanely bright toward the center.
A kind of inspiration from the Templar art again, where the eyes are mostly white, but they have that kind of hint of flame to them. I quite like it. Makes them look kind of like intense heat. Did you base that with the yellow and just highlight up to a pure white, or did you base it with white and then glaze it with contrast? Yeah, the second one, and not contrast either. Actually, it's the old yellow wash. Okay. Cassandora, and I think with a little bit of Fragan orange right at the very outer edge. Oh, okay. So yeah, it's white and then just yellow and orange shading. Okay. Which is pretty easy. I mean, you got to nail the white, but the rest of it is pretty easy. Mm-hmm. Well, I am going to close this down for the night because I am fading fast and my Benadryl is kicking in. I need to actually sleep tonight because I have to go work. I have to do some kind of work tomorrow. So, coming to the final segment of the show, I mean, you've mentioned a ton of people, so you don't have to re-mention them again. I'll put them down in the description below. But is there anybody in particular that you'd like to do a shout out to? Yeah, I thought about how to do the shout outs, and I guess like one of the things that I really love that probably doesn't come across as much in my Instagram feed is like conversions and kit bashes and stuff like that. I've got a stack of minis that I've been doing that kind of stuff on, and I've just not gotten around to painting them yet because I don't have the time to do everything. But I love seeing other people's work doing that, and so two kind of kit bashers and converters that I really love. One slightly lesser known, I think, and I had the privilege of meeting him the other weekend at the Salute convention in London. Mm-hmm. His name's Luke Mockridge, and he does. I mean, if you had to classify it, maybe you'd say it was like the kind of Ink 28 kind of style, like really detailed small miniatures, mm-hmm. Where he's done custom sculpting, conversion, a lot of just kind of plastic art that he's sculpted and added in there, and they are so detailed, they're so impressive, and they have a real kind of cohesion to their style. It's fantastic. And I recommend if anybody's not taking a look at his work, they do that because it's really inspiring. He's now kind of branched out into larger form sculpting. Mm-hmm. So there's some quite cool stuff that he's doing more recently, which is still very much kind of in the world of 40K, but not necessarily miniatures mm-hmm. stuff. And the other crazy kind of kit basher that I love, and he's much more popular, probably more people will have come across him, is Kit Bash Powerhead. It's kind of a neat name. And those things are absolutely incredible. I mean, I think he's probably most famous for his Dreadnought conversions, especially the Templar ones, but there are loads of different chapters. And his regular kind of Space Marine conversions are also fantastic. I mean, he's one of those people that when he's kind of finished the conversion, you look at it and you're like, I mean, this could just be a wild Games Workshop miniature. Yeah. it's completely in keeping with that world and stylistically works 100%. But they're completely custom and just incredible. So much detail, so many different kits being brought together into one amazing conversion. So yeah, those two I wanted to shout out. And then because we were talking to you and your background with the kind of old hammer stuff, something that I really enjoyed in that vein has been another YouTuber, another kind of interviewer and documentary maker called Tom Evans. His YouTube and Instagram handle is Film Deg Miniatures. And he has interviewed, at this point, probably pretty much every influential Games Workshop employee and sculptor and artist.
I think I know the guy you're talking about.
Including John Blanche himself.
Yeah.
A couple of times. And he's recently got done with a couple of proper documentaries about...
Didn't he talk to Mike McVeigh?
Yeah.
Okay, that is the guy. No, yeah, he does some really cool videos.
Yeah, so there's loads of fascinating stuff there, talking to the people that were kind of around in those early days. And yeah, so I really recommend checking those out if you're up for some old hammer wheel world lore, I guess, like about where all this came from.
Well, cool. All right. So if I will go ahead and wrap this up, and let me get to 35 seconds. Thank you very much, Luke, for coming on the show. It was great talking to you, and all of the links, all of the people that you shouted out during the show, I'll have them in the description below, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Thank you for watching.